Chapter 3746. Xiaohua didn't know how big this hurricane was. After flying for several hours, he finally saw the edge of the hurricane. Only then did the oppressive force begin to slowly lessen. If that's the case, then we don't need to fly anymore. Xiaohua did his best to rush out of the hurricane and shouted with a loud laugh. But just as he shouted, Xiaohua's body suddenly fell, and his face became deathly pale. After Xiaohua stabilized his body, a pair of wings that were only a few feet long grew out and slowly brought Xiaohua and Fairy Xiangfeng down. Xiaohua bitterly smiled and said, "Taoist El Dreamy, this Xiao's spirit sense has been greatly exhausted. It seems that we can only walk step by step." "No worries." Fairy Xiangfeng's eyes flashed and smiled. "I'm already very satisfied to be able to escape with Taoist Yun Meng's blessing. What's wrong with walking a few more steps?" "Okay, we'll walk slowly," Xiaohua said as he released his hand. Fairy Xiangfeng also transformed into a simple flying boat and descended from the sky. After Fairy Xiangfeng landed, she immediately placed her hand on her waist and bit her lip. At this moment, other than spiritual will, there were no other sacred arts that could be used. Xiaohua's struggle in the hurricane had already exhausted his spiritual will. Fairy Xiangfeng didn't think that Xiaohua would have a stronger spiritual will than her when her own Naiwen palace was in extreme pain. Not good. Before Fairy Xiangfeng could take out the item, Xiaohua looked into the distance with a puzzled expression. "What's wrong? Taoist Xiao?" Fairy Xiangfeng moved her hand away from her waist and looked into the distance and released her spirit sense again. However, the area dozens of miles in front of him was still empty, and there was nothing suspicious about it. Listen, Xiaohua was very mysterious. He put his index finger on his mouth and whispered. Fairy Xiangfeng frowned and listened attentively. Sure enough, in just a few moments, her expression changed drastically. That was because there was a slight vibration coming from the wind. It was slow and rhythmic. Even though the vibration was slight, it covered a huge area. Fairy Xiangfeng's expression changed not only because of the vibration but also because of Xiaohua's sharp senses. If not for Xiaohua's warning, Fairy Xiangfeng wouldn't have noticed it. This must be another test. Fairy Xiangfeng's mouth was bitter as she looked at Xiaohua and asked in a low voice. Xiaohua looked around and nodded. "Yes, and it came from the path we had to pass. I'm afraid we can't avoid it." Fairy Xiangfeng suggested. "We can avoid the trap first. With Taoist Xiao's ability, the trap won't be able to hurt us. Then, we can avoid the test." At this point, Fairy Xiangfeng didn't even want to continue. She knew that there was no need to test it. The trap before the hurricane and after the hurricane were definitely different. Since it was a test, even if they hid in the trap, they might not be able to avoid the test. "Let's go." Xiaohua waved his hand. "Let's see what the test." "All right." Fairy Xiangfeng had no choice but to agree. "I will need your help in the next test." At the same time, Fairy Xiangfeng felt a sense of guilt. That's right, why did I come to the Misty Mountain Maze formation? Taoist Xiaohua to avenge Taoist Xiangtian. But, before she could do anything, Xiaohua had helped her time and time again. Treasures, opportunities, and now her life was saved by him several times. She even had to ask him to take care of her here. How could she do anything? Thinking of this, Fairy Xiangfeng wiped away her good intentions. There are no good men in this world. Xiaohua is just trying to buy people's hearts. Roar! After walking for half a cup of tea's time, a huge brown bear charged over from afar. This brown bear was more than 10 zhang tall and its fur was standing on end. The brown bear was running on all fours. Occasionally, it would stand up and roar towards the sky. Its arms were waving crazily in the air. I understand. Seeing the brown bear, Fairy Xiangfeng immediately thought of the shape of the tunnel. How could she not know that this brown bear was the final test of the maze? But since it was the final test, the danger was self-evident. If it's just one or two, then it's fine. Xiaohua was very calm. He squinted his eyes at the approaching brown bear and said, "If it's a group, then it will be troublesome." That's right. A light flashed in front of Fairy Xiangfeng. A spear appeared and floated in the air. I can't just hide. I'll help Taoist Xiao. Okay. Xiao Huan nodded and continued to walk towards the brown bear. Fairy Xiang Feng reached out and grabbed the spear. A cold feeling came from the spear. Fairy Xiang Feng waved the spear and a gust of wind came. It was no different from a real spear. Fairy Xiang Feng looked again. She really did not understand how this space was set up. Could it be tribulation-passing cultivators are really omnipotent in this cultivation world? Fairy Xiang Feng was a little excited. But soon, the excitement turned into a sigh. Pity. I won't be able to see my tribulation-passing realm in this life. Thump, thump, thump. As the brown bear ran, the ground beneath Fairy Xiang Feng's feet began to tremble. The bear, which was hundreds of feet long, now looked extremely ferocious. An unpleasant stench assaulted her nostrils. Fairy Xiang Feng could even clearly see the blood-red eyes of the brown bear. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to act, Fairy Xiang Feng roared. Kill! As if she wanted to vent the hatred in her heart, the spear in Fairy Xiang Feng's hand flew straight towards the chest of the brown bear. The spear was like lightning, and the brown bear went crazy. The bear's paw slapped on the spear, but the strength of the spear was enough. The bear's paw bounced back as if it had been electrocuted. Pooh! The moment the bear's paw bounced back, the spear pierced the brown bear's chest. However, the long spear pierced through the bear's chest, and it flew straight for 100 meters before slowly disappearing. The brown bear still rushed forward for a few meters, then it fell to the ground and disappeared in a moment while howling. Good. Xiao Hua gave a thumbs up. Taoist Yun Meng is really good. Thank you, thank you. Fairy Xiang Feng said modestly. Another spear appeared in her hand. However, this time, Fairy Xiang Feng's gaze fell on Xiao Hua's throat. The ground shook again. Even more stench came from afar, and even more screams came from afar. Kill. Fairy Xiang Feng moved her gaze away from Xiao Hua and looked into the distance. That group of brown bears had turned into Xiao Hus. When these brown bears were close enough, Fairy Xiang Feng roared and waved her arms. Spears flew out of her hands and killed the brown bears one after another. They fell down and disappeared. Seeing Fairy Xiang Feng so fierce, Xiao Hua was surprised. However, he didn't have time to think about Fairy Xiang Feng's transformation. He released his divine sense and looked at the seemingly endless brown bears. These brown bears were not like the hurricane from before. They were extremely lethal. Moreover, seeing Fairy Xiang Feng's spear attack, some of the brown bears were already able to block it. Needless to say, the brown bears behind were even more powerful. Presumably, the spear would not be able to kill them easily. What should he and Fairy Xiang Feng do when they encounter such a brown bear? Could it be Senior Zhang Longzi really wants to kill the Dao sect juniors who enter the maze? Xiao Hua was confused. If that's the case, why did the previous maze have a cultivation technique? But if he only wants to test the cultivation of the cultivators who enter the maze, why does he have to kill them like this? Even with Yun Mingzi's late-stage Yuaning cultivation, he can't handle it. I understand now. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. Zhang Longzi was an ancient cultivator who went through the tribulation. Let's not talk about his own cultivation, just the cultivation of the other Taoist seniors should be around the 7th or 8th stage. As for the 2 layers of formations that Senior Zhang Longzi set up outside the maze, it would be difficult to break through without a 7th or 8th grade essence force. Therefore, the maze within the cave is naturally targeted at the 8th grade essence force. Even though the maze has been worn down for millions of years and its power is very weak, the maze within the cave is much weaker than the maze outside. Therefore, its power is much greater. Damn it, it seems like I have harmed everyone. If it weren't for Xiao Hua, Zhang Daoran and the others wouldn't even be able to break through the outer formation, how could they enter the maze? If they couldn't enter the maze, they wouldn't lose their lives. Seeing how Fairy Xiang Feng was facing such a difficult situation, Xiao Hua could already imagine the danger Sun Kong and the others were facing. If they lost their lives, it would be Xiao Hua's fault. Xiao Hua couldn't help but recall what Fairy Jing had said to him in front of Heartbreak Mountain, as well as her advice to him. Yes, an ancient maze. It's not something we can easily enter with the Tao sect in its declining state. Xiao Hua sighed and condensed his spiritual will into a hammer. Boom! The hammer fell and several brown bears were reduced to nothingness as they howled in grief. Ah! Fairy Xiang Feng was caught unprepared. She cried out in surprise and the spear in her hands stopped moving. Looking at the hammer that destroyed several brown bears, she fell into a daze. She knew in her heart that although her spear was powerful, the spear itself was made of spiritual will. Every time she used it, she would consume some of it. Her already sore Naiwan palace was now in a tearing pain. She simply could not hold on for too long. But looking at Xiao Hua, his spiritual will was like a hammer. How much spiritual will did he consume? Could it be that Xiao Hua didn't consume much spiritual will in the hurricane? Chapter 3747. Taoist Master Xiao. Fairy Xiang Feng suddenly felt a sense of relief. She laughed and said, "Since we can't retreat, why don't we just charge forward? We can kill as many brown bears as we can. This old man is satisfied to be able to die together with Taoist Master Xiao." "Good. As you wish." Xiao Hua was also filled with lofty sentiments. He loudly responded and pounced towards the brown bears. As Xiao Hua's figure moved, boom, boom, boom. Huge rumbling sounds came from midair. The entire space shook. Huge rocks fell from the sky like falling stars, smashing towards the thousands of brown bears. Fairy Xiang Feng was stunned for a moment. She smiled bitterly and also charged forward. The long spear in her hand stabbed out. Fairy Xiang Feng had already made her decision. Perhaps only if she died under the paws of the brown bears would she not hesitate to kill Xiao Hua. Perhaps if she and Xiao Hua both died here, she would be able to take revenge for Taoist Master Xiang Tian. As the two of them charged into the group of brown bears, an apocalyptic scene appeared. Huge rocks fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. Along with the deafening sound, the brown bears disappeared one by one. Although there was no smoke or dust, within a radius of a few li, there were cries and cries everywhere. Fairy Xiang Feng first tried her best to use her spiritual sense to kill the brown bears. However, after an unknown period of time, her spiritual sense had already dried up. Not to mention the long spear, she could not even condense a blade of grass. At the same time, Fairy Xiang Feng did not know how long she had been running with Xiao Hua. A fatigue that she had not felt in 1,000 years appeared in her body. When she looked at Xiao Hua again, she saw that he was no longer as vigorous as before. The falling rocks in the sky had also become sparse. However, the brown bears in front of Xiao Hua and Fairy Xiang Feng were still endless. They could not kill them all. "Xiang Ten, this concubine will follow you. You will not be lonely in the underworld." Fairy Xiang Feng muttered in her heart. Her body also slowed down. "Damn it." Seeing Fairy Xiang Feng land, Xiao Hua also stopped. He shouted, "Taoist Yun Meng, hold on for a while longer. I'm afraid this old man cannot hold on anymore." Fairy Xiang Feng smiled sadly. This old man, although I was prepared and thought of the ending, this old man never thought of the process. Ending? Process? Xiao Hua was startled. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. He looked at the brown bears that filled his vision, then turned back to look at the sky from before. He said confidently, "Taoist Elmar, please wait a moment. I understand." "Spiritual Master Xiao." Fairy Xiang Feng was slightly surprised. She raised her head and saw several huge rocks exploding in midair. Each of the huge rocks formed a huge whirlpool. These whirlpools quickly gathered at one spot and finally formed a whirlpool that was dozens of feet in size. This whirlpool spun rapidly and gradually expanded. As it expanded, the suction force increased as well. Awoo! At first, the brown bears didn't care at all and pounced on Xiao Hua and the others. But before they could get close, the vortex sucked them in. When the suction force was enough, the brown bears flew up from the ground and landed in the vortex. Not only that, as the brown bears landed in the vortex expanded again and pounced on the ground. Fairy Xiang Feng saw this and immediately understood Xiao Hua's intention. This was an unimaginable idea. Since spiritual will could condense into anything, then the brown bears were naturally condensed by something similar to spiritual will. Xiaohua used his spiritual will to condense into a vortex and used his unimaginable spiritual will to push the vortex to suck the brown bears into the vortex. Then, not only could he kill the brown bears, after the brown bears were killed, their spiritual will would fuse into the vortex and increase the suction force of the vortex. This way, the vortex would be pushed one after another. Naturally, it was much more effective than the falling rocks and spears. Go! Xiaohua shouted. His face was as pale as paper. However, the huge vortex had already escaped from Xiaohua's control and slowly flew into the distance. As the vortex flew, more and more brown bears were sucked in. Boom! Xiaohua's body fell to the ground. He groaned in extreme exhaustion and said, Taoist Almar, this Zhao's Naiwan palace no longer has a trace of spiritual will. Let's rest for a while. Let's wait for this space to collapse. Rest is a must. Fairy Xiang Feng clenched her teeth. She stood up not far away and walked to Xiaohua's side. She took out a few qi long fang from her waist. This fang was blood red and almost transparent. At the tip of the fang, there was a trace of black. Furthermore, Taoist Xiao does not need to worry about resting anymore. Taoist Elmar? What is the meaning of this? Xiaohua lay on the ground weakly. Seeing Fairy Xiang Feng walking over with her fang, he asked curiously. Ah. Fairy Xiang Feng saw Xiaohua's confusion and laughed. What meaning can this concubine have? This concubine is only here to take the life of another. Xiaohua was shocked. He hurriedly tried to crawl up from the ground. Unfortunately, after struggling for a while, he could only barely sit up. He looked at Fairy Xiang Feng and said, You are not Almar? Of course this concubine is not Almar. Fairy Xiang Feng laughed sharply. This concubine is Fairy Xiang Feng. You personally killed that Reverend Xiang Tian's dual cultivation partner. How is this possible? Xiaohua looked at Fairy Xiang Feng and said in shock, You are clearly a male cultivator. Before I reached the Yuanying stage, I was naturally a male cultivator. Fairy Xiang Feng smiled sinisterly, but after reaching the Yuanying stage, I became a female. I understand. Xiaohua had already calmed down. He nodded and said, This Xiao has heard about your matter. At that time, this Xiao also sympathized with you. Sympathize? Is there any use in sympathizing? Fairy Xiangfeng's face showed loneliness. Sympathy can only be cheered by the weak. When I reached the late Yuanying stage, there was no sympathy in this world. Forget it. Since you want to take revenge for Reverend Xiang Tian, this Xiao also has nothing to say. However, this Xiao has already told you the ins and outs of the matter clearly. Xiaohua sighed and said, Although you love Reverend Xiang Tian, your love is already a burden. It is this love that led Reverend Xiang Tian to his death. Perhaps this Xiao will let him off in this Jade Pavilion gathering. However, there will be a day when he will die from his arrogance. No matter what, whoever killed Xiang Tian, I will kill that person. Fairy Xiang Feng said coldly, I do not care who is right or wrong. Xiaohua stared at Fairy Xiang Feng and asked, Even if it is your life's savior? That's right. Fairy Xiang Feng replied without hesitation, Reverend Xiao has saved me many times. I have long remembered it in my heart. Previously, I also had many opportunities to kill Reverend Xiaohua, but I was hesitating. Because this space is truly dangerous. No one can guarantee that they will be able to leave alive. If Reverend Xiang Tian and I were to die here, I naturally would not kill anyone. Unfortunately, Reverend Zhao's methods are heaven-defying. Such a difficult problem was easily solved by you. I have no choice but to take action. However, Reverend Xiao, please do not worry. I will not live alone. As long as Reverend Xiao dies in my hands, I will immediately commit suicide to repay Reverend Xiao for saving my life. Just based on the fang in your hand? Xiaohua said coldly, Do you think that it can pierce through this Xiao's diamond body? Reverend Xiao, I am afraid that you do not know what I am holding in my hand. Fairy Xiang Feng said coldly, This is a venomous dragon fang. Not only is it incomparably sharp, it is also extremely poisonous. Even if you have cultivated some diamond body, you will not be able to block this fang. The venomous dragon fang might not be able to pierce you to death, but the poison is enough to kill you. See. Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. Fear appeared on his pale face. However, after a moment, Xiaohua sighed. Forget it. This Xiao is indeed too kind. Although your background is somewhat strange, this Xiao did not look into it. This entire time, I have been taking care of you, protecting you to this place. Since you insist on taking this Xiao's life, this Xiao does not even have the strength to truss a chicken. I can only let you do as you wish. Come, as long as you do not let down your conscience, then do it. Conscience? Is there still a conscience in this world? Fairy Xiang Feng was somewhat agitated. When I was being bullied by those filthy people, where did their conscience go? Where are those people with a conscience? The suffering that I went through, who would know? Whenever this concubine is mentioned, who would think of the suffering that this concubine went through? They only think of filthy people, they only know how to say that my methods are ruthless. Even, there were cultivators who came to bully me after I formed my nascent soul. They keep saying that they look up to me. Where did their conscience go? Although Xiangtian is somewhat arrogant, he always protects me and gives in to me in everything. He never mentions anything that makes me unhappy. In my eyes, he is the one with the most conscience. Just for this so-called conscience, you go against your conscience to kill this Xiao. Xiao Hua said coldly, what is the difference between you and those people who humiliated you? There is no point in saying more, Taoist Xiao. Fairy Xiang Feng raised the venomous dragon fang and said indifferently, if not for the fact that you are my savior, I would definitely not say so much to you. I would definitely not let you know the truth. As she spoke, the venomous dragon fang descended like lightning. However, before it even landed halfway, Fairy Xiang Feng's hands began to tremble. Her entire body began to tremble and tears began to flow from her eyes. Who knows how many years she had persevered, but at this moment she finally collapsed. Fairy Xiang Feng raised her hand and shouted towards the sky, Xiangyan, you are forcing this concubine. Although this concubine has always doted on you and this concubine has never allowed you to do anything outrageous, how much have you done behind this concubine's back? Do you think this concubine does not know? This concubine has always been lucky and felt that perhaps no one would dare to touch you. However, this concubine knows that if you continue to act like this, something will happen sooner or later. Xiangtian, it is not that this concubine does not want to take revenge for you. However, if this concubine kills Taoist Xiao, this concubine is no better than a pig or a dog. What is the difference between this concubine and those animals? Xiangyan, wait for this concubine will follow you. As she spoke, Fairy Xiang Feng raised the venomous dragon fang and descended towards her snow-white neck. Chapter 3748. However, the moment the venomous dragon tooth was about to land, a powerful force grabbed Fairy Xiang Feng's hand. Who? Fairy Xiang Feng turned pale with fright and looked around. There is no one else in this space. Xiao Hua stood up with a smile on his face and said with a smile. Fairy Xiang Feng looked like she saw a ghost and said in shock, You don't ask me if I'm fine. Xiao Hua shrugged. This Xiao is naturally fine. How can you be fine? Even if it's a 7th grade spirit sense, it would be unavoidable for it to dry up here, right? Fairy Xiang Feng was shocked. Then she exclaimed, could it be that you already knew that I am Fairy Xiang Feng? Spirit sense, let's not talk about it. That's this Xiao's secret, I can't tell my enemies. Xiao Hua said with a smile, but speaking of your reason, this Xiao was already vigilant and was basically certain. How did you know? Since you were suspicious and even certain, why did you save me? Fairy Xiang Feng was confused. Xiao Hua shrugged and said with a smile, firstly, when Fairy was breaking the seal in the cave, you didn't use your natal magic artifact at the start. Presumably, you were trying to hide something? Fairy Xiang Feng clenched her teeth and didn't say anything. You let Di Quan lead the way and hide yourself. You thought that nobody would know, but Di Quan's occasional questions were all directed at Fairy. Doesn't that mean you're the mastermind? Especially when choosing the passage, Di Quan and the rest rushed to choose others. Obviously, they wanted to leave this Xiao last and be separated with you. Isn't that a flaw? Because they knew you wanted to kill this Xiao and they knew they weren't my match. Since you knew you weren't my match and still wanted to kill this Xiao, then if you're not Fairy Xiang Feng, who are you? Also, even though Fairy changed your appearance and your Yuanying is also a male, the fragrance on Fairy's body is still there. This can't help but make this Xiao suspicious. Fairy Xiang Feng bit her lips and retorted, "That's what you thought after the fact." Xiaohua ignored Fairy Xiang Feng and said, "As for why I saved you, it's because you're different from Fairy Su Ming. Fairy Su Ming is extremely arrogant and wanted to perish together with me when she saw me. As for you, even though your temperament has changed greatly, this is all because of the evil others have done to you. So you chose to fight evil with evil. What's more, once you cultivate to the 4th grade of essence force, others will fear you. You won't be able to experience the kindness of others. This Xiao feels that if you can experience the good in this world, perhaps the evil in your heart will decrease. Therefore, this Xiao cannot not save you. This Xiao hopes that there will be more good in this world." Fairy Xiangfeng's tears flowed down as if no one had ever said such words to her in her life. With evil in one's heart, no matter how high one's cultivation is, one's heart won't be calm and one's foundation won't be firm. Only with kindness in one's heart can one have a clear path between heaven and earth. Xiaohua continued, "Back then, I met a fish called Little Cabbage." Xiaohua narrated the story of Little Cabbage, causing Fairy Xiangfeng's face to be filled with tears and grief. Finally, Xiaohua smiled and said, "And you did not disappoint this Xiao. There's a saying in Buddhism that one can become a Buddha by letting go of the butcher's knife. Fairy is that fearless Buddha, a Buddha that has cut off the evil in your heart, a Buddha that has cut off everything from your past. I believe that with today's kindness and resolution, as well as the comprehension in the maze array, Fairy's future will be immeasurable. This concubine understands." Fairy Xiang Feng stopped crying and said with a choked voice, "Many thanks, Taoist, for your explanation. Even though this concubine cannot let go of the hatred in my heart, this concubine will try to think of Taoist's kindness in the future and treat people with kindness." "Good, if Fairy understands, this Xiao will let you go." Xiaohua nodded, "But if you let go of the venomous dragon tooth, this Xiao will take it away to prevent any more evil thoughts in your heart." "And this concubine understands." Fairy Xiang Feng let go of the venomous dragon tooth and Xiaohua also retracted his Buddha sense. As soon as Xiaohua retracted his Buddha sense, Fairy Xiang Feng immediately collapsed to the ground. Her state of mind changed so drastically in such a short period of time, it was really hard for her to accept. Without arcane energy, she was no different from an ordinary female cultivator. Kacha. At this time, a crisp cracking sound came from the distance, and cracks filled the sky in an instant. It was Xiaohua who had used the space to condense the vortex, and used the space's divine sense to break the space's restriction. Following the space's rupture, divine sense attacks that were 100 times more powerful than the soul stab swept across the sky, as if the space was struggling on its deathbed. How could Fairy Xiang Feng withstand these divine sense attacks? She screamed and fainted on the ground. On the other hand, layers of golden light appeared outside Xiaohua's Naiwen Palace as the innate divine restriction blocked the attacks. Pung. The moment the space cracked, Xiaohua sensed the heaven and earth yuan qi. He quickly slapped his hand and summoned the Kunlun mirror. While keeping Fairy Xiang Feng into the Kunlun ruins, he also kept the venomous dragon tooth into his spatial dimension. Sigh, poor Fairy Xiang Feng. Xiaohua kept the Kunlun mirror and sighed in his heart. Just as he said, if Fairy Xiang Feng was like Fairy Su Ming and attacked without any care, Xiaohua would not hold back either. However, with Fairy Xiang Feng's probing and Xiaohua's vigilance, Xiaohua gradually recalled the words about Fairy Xiang Feng's background. As the saying goes, a pitiful person must have a hateful side. At the same time, a hateful person would also have a pitiful side. Ordinary people with a compassionate heart would sigh at Fairy Xiang Feng's background, not to mention Xiaohua, a cultivator with a compassionate heart of a Buddhist sect. Along the way, Xiaohua was both on guard and enlightening her. Now, it seemed that it was still very effective. Fairy Xiang Feng was able to rein in the horse at the last moment. It could not be said that she had thrown away her burden, but at least she was not ruthlessly destroyed by Xiaohua. After this lesson, this poor person might have an epiphany. With the gains from the Misty Mountain Maze formation, her cultivation level will also improve. Her life will be exciting again. At this moment, the space within the maze formation collapsed and the surroundings were in chaos. The omnipresent waves were more powerful than a forest of blades and spears, wreaking havoc in the entire space. The target of these waves was the Naiwen Palace. If it were not for the innate divine restriction outside Xiaohua's Naiwen Palace, he would have been rolling on the ground in pain. If it were a serious injury, his Naiwen Palace would have been torn apart by the waves. This Xiao is really lucky. Xiaohua could sense that the innate divine restriction in his Naiwen Palace was flashing with golden light. Layers upon layers of divine miracles that seemed to be in a deep slumber began to awaken. One after another, ordinary or strange star charts appeared above his Naiwen Palace, revealing their majesty amidst the golden light. Xiaohua could not help but sigh. I wonder where this innate divine restriction came from. It has saved this Xiao's life time and time again. Hornwood dragon, fighting wood vermin, Kuei wood wolf. These are the real innate divine restrictions. How can those sinners of Star-Lord Palace represent them? That's right, other than the rabbit in the capital Sky Star formation and the rooster in the plentiful Sun Devil devouring immortal formation, there were even more lightning dragons, tigers and leopards appearing in the golden light. The original names of these innate divine restrictions did not matter. No one knew if they existed or not. Since the Immortal Palace or the Tao sect gave these rather interesting names based on the appearance of these innate divine restrictions, they would be called these names. If the Immortal Palace could use them, so could the Tao sect. With the activation of the innate divine restriction, traces of obscure waves rushed into Xiaohua's space. They either landed on the green-robed Xiaohua's body or in the starry sky of the Tao of Heaven Xiaohua. Xiaohua understood that this was the comprehension of the innate divine restriction. If his 10 avatars could comprehend all of these divine restrictions, his cultivation would definitely improve beyond his wildest dreams. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's avatar rushed into the space. He ignored the green-robed Xiaohua and landed in the starry sky. He cupped his hands and said, Tao friend Tao of Heaven Tao, I greet you. There was no sound or movement in the starry sky. However, Xiaohua knew that Tao of Heaven Tao had heard him. He continued, I know that this innate divine restriction is very abstruse. Ordinary cultivators can't comprehend it. Even if it's the green-robed Tao friend, his main body wouldn't allow him to comprehend the abstruse of the divine restriction. Only Tao friend Tao of Heaven Tao, whose main body is the abstruse of the Tao of Heaven, is able to comprehend this innate divine restriction naturally. Furthermore, you won't suffer any backlash from the divine restriction. You will be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. Therefore, on behalf of the other Tao friends, I earnestly request Tao friend to comprehend these innate divine restrictions. The entire starry sky suddenly stopped. It was very strange. However, in just a moment, the waves coming from the Naiwen Palace seemed to be grabbed by a big hand and didn't go anywhere else. They were all thrown into the starry sky. It was like a stone thrown into the water. In an instant, the entire starry sky became alive again. At the same time, waves of comprehension rushed toward Xiaohua like a mountain flood and a tsunami. Xiaohua hurriedly cut off these comprehensions. He smiled bitterly and said, Tao friend Tao of Heaven Tao, I'll leave these comprehensions with you first. When I have the time, I'll slowly absorb them. Although you and I have the same comprehension, this huge amount of comprehension is enough to make I explode. Following Xiaohua's voice, the huge amount of waves instantly disappeared and turned into a trickle. Many thanks, Tao friend. Xiaohua cupped his hands and came out of the space. However, just as Xiaohua's consciousness came out, he immediately felt that something was wrong. This was because when Xiaohua entered this spiritual sense space, he was inside the passage of the Misty Mountain Maze formation. Although this passage was tall and spacious, it was still limited. If the spiritual sense space collapsed, the passage would inevitably be revealed. Now, the spiritual sense attack in the entire space had already disappeared. The feeling of light had already weakened. The passage from before still hadn't revealed itself. In particular, Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly released his Buddhist sense. Although his Buddhist sense couldn't be compared to his spiritual sense, it still couldn't find the end of the space. Chapter 3749. This is... Xiaohua, who had already grasped the pearl of wisdom, began to wonder. He couldn't imagine what kind of difficulties there would be after the test of the divine sense space. Just as Xiaohua released his Buddhist sense to explore his surroundings, suddenly, from the four corners of the space, 4 pillars of orange qi soared into the sky and wrapped around Xiaohua. The 4 pillars of boundless qi fell from the sky and condensed into 4 strange shapes. They looked like beasts, but also like something else. They couldn't be identified. Once these 4 boundless qi forms were formed, a kind of aura that could suppress everything was emitted from them. It quickly filled the entire space. What was special was that these 4 similar auras were mixed together like water and milk. They surged and rushed toward Xiaohua. Not only that, when the auras sealed the space, thousands of inscriptions gushed out from the 4 Aoran Qi forms, condensing into sentences and articles one by one, and finally forming a book that covered the entire space. How can this be? Is it possible that they want to test the cultivation of a Confucian cultivator now? Xiaohua was completely puzzled, somewhat at a loss. Who? Suddenly, Xiaohua's eyes widened, and a fierce look flashed through his eyes. He switched his Buddhist sense to soul sense and looked below one of the Aoran Qi forms. Following Xiaohua's stern shout, a Confucian cultivator wearing a brocade robe came out from the Aoran Qi pillars, but this Confucian cultivator was in a very sorry state. Not only was his hair abnormally messy, but his brocade robe was also torn to pieces. At this time, the Confucian cultivator was holding a square-shaped imperial tool in his hand. Clouds lingered inside, and wisps of orange qi formed from the void and fell on it. As soon as the Confucian cultivator stepped into the air, he immediately looked at Xiaohua in surprise. His thick eyebrows trembled slightly, and he asked curiously, "Huh? Your divine sense hasn't been exhausted yet? How did you find this old man?" Xiaohua didn't answer the Confucian cultivator's question. He looked at the imperial tool in the Confucian cultivator's hand, then narrowed his eyes and looked at the Aoran Qi that had already merged together in the air. At this time, how could he not know that this was the Confucian cultivator's origin array? How could he not know that he had fallen into the Confucian cultivator's trap? However, he was very puzzled. Where did this Confucian cultivator come from? How did this Confucian cultivator follow him? How did this Confucian cultivator avoid the spiritual force storm in the spiritual force dimension? Moreover, how did this Confucian cultivator set up such an origin formation in such a short period of time? Sir, as long as you tell me who you are and why you set up this defensive formation, I will tell you how I discovered you, Xiaohua coldly replied. Defensive array? Ha, you really are a half-baked Confucian cultivator. The Confucian cultivator laughed and said, "Our Confucian cultivator's array formation is called the origin array. How can it be called the imperial array? The so-called primordial array is also called defensive array is nothing but nonsense. This Xiao's lack of skill is my own problem. I don't need others to lecture me." Xiaohua stared at the Confucian cultivator and asked, "I heard that Confucian cultivators are most particular about not changing their names. May I know what your name is?" "Hee, you are indeed sharp-tongued. It is no wonder that Duanmu Qing lost to you." The Confucian cultivator chuckled and said without hiding anything. Hearing this Confucian cultivator mention Duanmu Qing, Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. He looked at the Confucian cultivator's thick eyebrows and said thoughtfully, "So you are from the Duanmu family?" "That's right. This old man is Duanmu Liangxing." The Confucian cultivator ignored Xiaohua's gaze and calmly replied. Sigh. Seeing this, Xiaohua sighed and said, "Although this Xiao is very respectful to Confucian cultivator families, the Duanmu family has really disappointed this Xiao. The reason for this Xiao's enmity with Duanmu Qing is very simple. For this small matter, your Duanmu family first lent a scroll to help the state preceptor of the Bronze Pillar Nation. Now, you even sent your excellency to kill this Shao from afar. Is this the action of a proper Confucian cultivator family? Moreover, this Shao remembers that Duanmu Qing is only a scholar. In order to deal with this Shao, the Duanmu family actually sent out a great grandmaster. Don't you think this is shameful? Duanmu Liangsheng smiled slightly and stretched out his hand to tidy up the scattered hair on his head. He said, "Fortunately, this old man came. If it was someone else, wouldn't it be like throwing a meat bun to a dog?" As he spoke, Duanmu Liangsheng raised his eyes and looked to the left and said, "To be honest, this clan order should not have been accepted by this old man. However, this old man just happened to want to avoid trifling matters within the clan. Therefore, I took the initiative to go to Black Wind Ridge to find you." But what this old man did not expect was that Black Wind Ridge actually had another scenery. With this old man's cultivation, I could not easily enter the formation. This old man already had a premonition in his heart that you were going to give this old man a surprise. When this old man knew that you were going to Yaotai Mountain to participate in the Yaotai gathering, this old man purposely waited for you along the way. Although this old man did not manage to wait for you, this old man heard of Taoist Master Zhao's great name from the mouths of some nascent soul cultivators. At that time, this old man could not help but have a whole new level of respect for you. How could you be the little Confucian cultivator that Duanmu Qing spoke of who only had the strength of a second or third grade essence force? You could even assassinate the state teacher of the Bronze Pillar State and even participate in the Yaotai gathering. If you did not have the strength of a fourth grade essence force, this old man's name, Duanmu, would be erased from this old man's name. Moreover, looking at this spiritual sense space, damn it, even this old man's spiritual sense has been messed up. If this old man did not have a imperial equipment passed down from my ancestors, this old man is afraid that before this old man could even see you, I would have been buried here, right? Since that is the case, how confident do you think you are? Xiaohua looked at this opponent whose strength was second only to Kong Hongwu and asked indifferently. 90%. Duanmu Liangsheng said with great confidence. Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "You are very conceited." Of course, Duanmu Liangsheng said with a smile, "You only have the strength of a fourth grade essence force, while this old man has the strength of a fifth grade intermediate essence force. How can you be this old man's opponent? Moreover, if there is no accident, this spiritual sense space should have been broken by you, right? This old man does not think that. You still have much spiritual sense in your Naiwan palace. Lastly, since you are proficient in the array formation of the passageway, you must have seen that you and I are currently inside an essence formation. This essence formation was set up by this old man at the risk of exhausting my spiritual sense. With this essence formation, this old man can replenish the true qi and spiritual sense that I had previously exhausted. If this old man did not have a kind of warning sign, I would definitely say that I am 100% confident. You have calculated very well. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "However, if you used this scheme to bully the weak, even this Xiao would feel ashamed." Duanmu Liangsheng smiled faintly and waved his hand, saying, "You are wrong. Today, this old man only needs to kill you here. Who would know that this old man came here? Who would know that my Duanmu family had once made a move against you? You have said so much. Could it be that you want to wait for this old man to show mercy? Could it be that you want to wait for other cultivators? No, this Xiao only wants to confirm whether or not you deserve to be killed." Xiaohua took a deep breath and said coldly as he looked at Duanmu Liangsheng. "Haha, Xiaohua, you are really too arrogant." Duanmu Liangsheng laughed, and at this moment, Xiaohua's whole body suddenly produced a strange fluctuation. His whole body was like a breeze blowing, and in the blink of an eye, he had already arrived at Duanmu Liangsheng's side. He raised his hand and took out the wishful steel staff. Boom! It smashed down with a bang. Puff, puff, puff. Just as the wishful steel staff fell, dozens of great spirit chi were born in midair. Although the wishful steel staff was like a hot knife through butter, when the wishful steel staff fell on Duanmu Liangsheng's body, his figure had already turned into an afterimage, and Duanmu Liangsheng's figure had already appeared in another place. Spirit refining. Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. Duanmu Liangsheng proudly said, "Yes, this old man has already killed a spirit-refining great master. Xiao Hua, you are not this old man's opponent, so obediently surrender. This old man will not take your life, and will only capture you back to the clan. As far as this old man knows, the clan may not punish you too severely." This Xiao Hua has seen many sanctimonious hypocrites. If this Xiao Hua falls into the hands of you Confucian cultivators, you will not say such things again. Xiao Hua said coldly. He knew that the news of his great strength must have been reported to the Duanmu family by Duanmu Qing, and this Duanmu Liangsheng must have been prepared. In this elemental formation, Duanmu Liangsheng almost had the ability to teleport, and Xiao Hua could not do anything with the wishful steel staff alone. Just as Xiao Hua raised his hand and was about to take out the seal of overturning the sea or the Kunlun mirror, Xiao Hua rolled his eyes and came up with a plan in his heart. He waved his hand and a golden light flashed out, striking towards Duanmu Liangsheng's neck. At the same time, Xiao Hua slapped his forehead with his hand. Rumble! Numerous pillars of righteous qi that were much thicker than the usual pillars of righteous qi came out from the origin formation. What was special was that there were 4 pillars of righteous qi that were as thick as a thumb that rushed out from the 4 monstrous righteous qi and landed on Xiao Hua's body along with the other righteous qi pillars. Weng weng. 2 deafening sword cries were produced from Xiao Hua's body, and 2 green and red sword lights flew out, flying towards Duanmu Liangsheng's chest. Ah! Xiao Hua's soaring dragon shears was extremely fast. Once it was swung out, it immediately landed a few feet away from Duanmu Liangsheng. Duanmu Liangsheng cried out in alarm, and his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, his back was already drenched in cold sweat. He almost did not even have the chance to activate the elemental formation. Duanmu Liangsheng was still afraid, and raised his hand. A green and bewitching light was produced from his fingers, and a verdant flying sword flashed with a dazzling brilliance and appeared in midair. At the same time, the flying sword in Xiao Hua's mouth had turned into a rainbow and once again rushed towards Duanmu Liangsheng's chest. True qi? Sword qi? Duanmu Liangsheng was stunned. You? How do you also have Confucian true qi? However, Duanmu Liangsheng was only stunned for a moment. He waved the long sword in his hand, and like a peacock spreading its tail, a fan-shaped sword light immediately appeared in midair. Each sword light was composed of tens of thousands of sword splendors, and each sword splendor had crazily rotating inscriptions. Xiao Hua's flying sword fell on this sword light, and with a loud boom boom, a series of qi waves rose up, and one by one, the inscriptions were torn apart. The entire sword light was broken by more than half, but the 2 flying swords' sword power was still blocked. Chapter 3750. Duanmu Liangsheng looked at Xiao Hua's flying swords in disbelief. He really did not expect that Xiao Hua, a half-baked Confucian cultivator, would have such strength. Furthermore, Xiao Hua's flying swords were so powerful. However, Duanmu Liangsheng was still in shock. He saw the brilliance of the 2 flying swords converge, and then the awe-inspiring qi within 100 feet seemed to be boiling and surging toward the green sword light. Buzz buzz buzz. The violent sword hum once again resounded through the sky. A green flying sword of several hundred feet in size appeared out of thin air. As Xiao Hua's hands formed a sword seal, it carried a seemingly endless power as it slashed toward Duanmu Liangsheng. Under the sword light, an area of several hundred feet was shrouded. An indescribable feeling of palpitations rose from the bottom of Duanmu Liangsheng's heart, causing him to involuntarily stagnate. It was also during the stagnation that the huge sword light landed on the sword brilliance that had yet to be completely destroyed. The seemingly sharp sword brilliance was torn apart with a slash sound, and on Duanmu Liangsheng's forehead, a rarely seen layer of goosebumps appeared. The reason why Duanmu Liangsheng laid down the primary formation was not only because of the excessive consumption of his divine sense, but also because he had used some secret techniques when contending with the divine sense space. He had no choice but to rely on the awe-inspiring qi of the primary formation. In particular, in his plan, within this primary formation he could rely on his divine sense to transform into nothingness, as well as the means of a Confucian cultivator to move around everywhere. Even when facing Xiaohua, who was at the upper fourth level of divine sense, he would still be in an invincible position. However, he did not expect that Xiaohua actually had the strength to transform into a sword and could also use the awe-inspiring qi of the primary formation. Therefore, when faced with the sword light that carried the power of the primary formation, the first thing he thought of was to dodge. Duanmu Liangsheng's figure swayed and was about to disappear. However, at this moment, the green sword light trembled slightly. The space of several hundred feet flashed with fine sword light at the same time. The sword light emitted a piercing sword qi. Although the sword qi and sword light could not be seen by Duanmu Liangsheng, there were so many sword lights that it actually produced a kind of confinement force, dragging his body down. As the sword qi permeated the awe-inspiring qi, the confinement force became stronger and stronger. Damn it! Duanmu Liangsheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. This is the primary formation that I set up. I'm the one in charge of the primary formation. Why does it feel like I'm a pigeon in a magpie's nest? Boom! Duanmu Liangsheng waved his sleeves and a vast wave of energy surged out from his body. It surged towards the green sword qi and sword beam. However, at this moment, another sword hum was heard. After the green sword beam, another red sword beam soared into the sky. It was much sharper and more imposing than the green sword beam from before. It came crashing down on Duanmu Liangsheng. When Duanmu Liangsheng saw the power of these two swords, he was even more surprised. It was far more shocking than when he discovered Xiaohua's true strength. However, at the same time, he also wanted to test Xiaohua's strength. He no longer urged the vast wave of energy. Instead, with a wave of his right hand, his right arm suddenly grew longer and thicker. The green flying sword from before once again appeared. As Duanmu Liangsheng urged his genuine qi and waved it out, shua! A startling rainbow flew up even more gracefully than Xiaohua's flying sword. Not only did it cut Xiaohua's sword qi into two, it also ruthlessly slashed at the two flying swords. King. Seeing his own flying sword's imposing aura, Duanmu Liangsheng narrowed his eyes and used the eye-clearing technique to look at Xiaohua. To Duanmu Liangsheng's surprise, Xiaohua's expression changed slightly. He opened his mouth again and his two hands formed a sword seal. Another two sword beams flew out from his mouth. One of the sword beams was golden and extremely dazzling. The other was a faint green qi and its true luster could not be seen clearly. Once these two sword beams came out, an equally powerful sword aura was generated. They turned into two giant swords and pounced on Duanmu Liangsheng. Before the two flying swords even landed, the green and red flying sword from before chimed in with a sword hum. The sword qi that had been suppressed by the bamboo sword beam suddenly surged. Duanmu Liangsheng raised his eyebrows and was secretly surprised. This Xiaohua, could it be that he obtained the lost sword technique of legalism? Otherwise, how could he display such an authentic Confucian sword technique? Go! Duanmu Liangsheng was shocked. He activated 20% of his vital qi on the flying sword in his hand. The bamboo sword beam expanded and blocked the aura of the four flying swords. Seeing that the four flying swords were about to collide with Duanmu Liangsheng's flying swords, Duanmu Liangsheng opened his mouth and activated the primary formation with his left hand. King. Duanmu Liangsheng heard two familiar sword hum. The corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily as he looked up again. To his surprise, Xiaohua's sword force this time was even more ferocious than the previous two times. Before he could even see the sword light, a monstrous sword force had already rushed toward him, especially when two streaks of misty green sword light appeared. 6 flying swords, 6 streaks of sword qi had already merged into one. Although the green-red sword light in front had already struck Duanmu Liangsheng's flying sword, the other 4 flying swords behind seemed to have reached him first. They struck at lightning speed at the same time. Ah! Duanmu Liangsheng could not help but exclaim. His body expanded rapidly and wisps of sword qi leaked out. It was as if thousands of tiny flying swords were rushing out of the air. Some pierced into the void, some pierced into Duanmu Liangsheng's Confucian robes, and some pierced into the billowing qi waves. Keng Keng. Just as Duanmu Liangsheng was forced to activate his vital qi to block Xiao Hua's 6 flying swords, the sword intent of the bamboo flying swords decreased. Duanmu Liangsheng heard 2 sword hum in his ears. How is this possible? Duanmu Liangsheng was dumbfounded. Duanmu Qing, did you make a mistake? How can this Xiao Hua be a Dao cultivator? Must be a disciple of the declining legalism, right? This is 8 swords in one breath. Other than legalism disciples, no one else can do this without legalism's secret technique. Furthermore, this Xiao Hua's first 3 flying swords were completely condensed from vital qi. Although the remaining 6 flying swords were not condensed, they no longer had a sword form. Isn't this the legalism sword intent? Xiao Hua's 6 huge swords were destroyed by Duanmu Liangsheng's flying swords. However, only the sword beams and sword intent were destroyed. The condensed sword qi was only sent flying. When Xiao Hua's last 2 swords were unleashed, the 6 flying swords that were forced back by Duanmu Liangsheng surged with sword intent. 8 sword beams rushed toward Duanmu Liangsheng like a sun. Duanmu Liangsheng was astonished and felt that he was unstoppable. Duanmu Liangsheng did not have time to activate his flying swords. He hastily slapped his forehead. Buzz! 3 colored vital qi spewed out. When the vital qi landed in the air, it immediately merged with the vital qi of the primary array. Then, Duanmu Liangsheng's subbody rapidly formed. The moment the subbody appeared, it immediately clenched its fist. Within a radius of several hundred feet, the vital qi suddenly surged. The huge fist smashed toward the 8 sword beams. The fist's momentum was like thunder, causing the entire primary array to rumble. Clang, clang. Just as Duanmu Liangsheng's subbody was about to win, 2 more sword hums sounded. Duanmu Liangsheng's body trembled. His condensed subbody almost collapsed. Duanmu Liangsheng could not help but groan in his heart. This Xiao Hua, how many flying swords does he have? No, the sword hums are not right. He has turned into a sword. Of course, the 2 sword hums were not the same as the previous one. The first hums were soft, but it was a breath of sword qi that flew out from Xiao Hua's body like a meteor. The second sword hums had the intention of 10,000 swords worshipping their ancestor. It resonated with the first sword hums. Immediately after, within the space of several dozen feet to the left of Xiao Hua, the noble spirit was swept away. Xiao Hua's own body emitted a sword aura. That sword aura was mixed with a soaring sword will and unyielding sword aura. It transformed into a sharp flying sword that charged towards the fist of the second body. Moreover, as Xiao Hua transformed into a sword, the 9 flying swords from before seemed to have transformed into a single flying sword. The strength of that flying sword was more than twice as strong as before. What a genius! Duanmu Liangsheng groaned. He could not help but admire this genius. Xiao Hua's cultivation is only at the upper 4th grade of essence force. To think that he has such attainments in the way of the sword. This is the first time this old man has seen someone like him. Although he is a disciple of the legalism sect and even has the cultivation of Taoism, he was captured by this old man just because of that small matter with Duanmu Qing. Who knows what kind of trouble he will cause? Shouldn't this old man make a decision? However, before Duanmu Liangsheng could make a decision, Xiao Hua's transformed flying sword was already close to him. Good. Seeing such power, Duanmu Liangsheng's heroic spirit was ignited. He had long forgotten about Xiao Hua's astonishing divine strength. He shouted, "This old man wants to see what cultivation you have. If you can withstand 3 punches from this old man will make the decision to let you go." Hearing Duanmu Liangsheng's words, Xiao Hua, who had already transformed into a sword, frowned. The killing intent in his heart gradually dissipated. He thought to himself, "Oh? As the saying goes, there are all kinds of birds in the forest. Why does this Duanmu Liangsheng's words sound more and more like the words of a human? Completely different from Duanmu Qing? Of course, I cannot rule out the possibility that this person is extremely scheming and wants to tempt me with his words. However, even so, I cannot rashly kill him at this moment. Not to mention the huge price I have to pay to kill him. If I kill him, won't the Duanmu family know about my strength? If I kill him, they will send over cultivators even more powerful than Duanmu Liangsheng. Since that is the case, why don't I keep Duanmu Liangsheng alive and use him as a cover for myself? Yes, I will do that. I will use this to trick the Duanmu family. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's sword did not stop moving. He coldly said, "What a big talk. Eat my sword first." Seeing that Xiaohua's sword was unparalleled, Duanmu Liangsheng's body waved his hands. His arms surged with a jade-green color. His fists also flashed with a jade-green sword light. Even the upper body of his body had turned into jade-green. Chapter 3751. Boom! The 9 stars soaring sun flying sword pierced right in front of Duanmu Liangsheng. A violent sword chi rushed into his body. Duanmu Liangsheng's eyes were filled with a kind of fanaticism. His entire body shook violently like a roly-poly toy. Immediately after, there was a loud roar. Xiaohua's sword body fell. Duanmu Liangsheng's huge body fell several dozen feet. At the same time, Duanmu Liangsheng let out an angry roar. Break? His sword-like arms blossomed with an extremely resplendent light. Duanmu Liangsheng had actually used 70% of his qi to strike Xiaohua's sword. Although Duanmu Liangsheng's body was trembling and had fallen several hundred feet, he was still standing majestically. When he looked at Xiaohua's sword form, he was sent flying with a loud bang. However, Xiaohua's body was still in the form of a flying sword without any changes. Seeing this, Duanmu Liangsheng could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. However, just at this time, Xiaohua's figure that was sent flying by the sword suddenly flashed with the color of lightning. Rumble. Several thunderbolts were produced from the sword. Immediately after, the 9 stars soaring sun flying swords were also attracted by these thunderbolts. One after the other, one after the other, one after the other. By the time Duanmu Liangsheng noticed, Xiaohua's sword body and the 9 flying swords had already turned into a shadow in the sky. Oh, not good. Seeing Xiaohua escape from his sight in an instant, Duanmu Liangsheng was stunned at first, then suddenly realized, this little guy actually wanted to escape from the beginning. It turns out that he did not intend to fight with this old man. Duanmu Liangsheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He hurriedly waved his body and several streams of Auran Qi rushed into the void like pearls. The moment the Auran Qi disappeared, the entire primary array shook violently. The 4 strange Auran Qi figures at the 4 corners of the primary array let out a series of chanting sounds. One after another, Auran Qi pillars rushed out from the figures and shot towards the place where Xiaohua had disappeared to. Looking at Xiaohua again, he turned into a sword and pierced into a corner of the origin formation with the sharpness of the 9 stars transit of the sun. However, the space was extremely distorted and countless inscriptions overflowed from the distorted space, flashing crazily. There was even a Hauran Qi pillar that landed on the distorted space, trying to repair the torn gap. Open. Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. His entire figure slightly separated from the sword and immediately took out the Kunlun mirror. Where his transcendence energy was activated, a beam of light rushed to the place where the space was torn apart. Kacha! A crisp sound rang out. The entire primordial formation was torn apart by a crack of several feet. Go! Xiaohua didn't stop at all. His transformed sword once again activated the lightning escape. Together with his flying sword, he pierced through the gap and disappeared. Boom! The moment Xiaohua disappeared, a big hand reached out in a flash. Unfortunately, it only caught a few streaks of lightning in the hand and did not even touch the flying sword body. Damn it! Duanmu Liangsheng's sub-body had teleported to the crack. He looked at the spot where Xiaohua had disappeared and the crack was rapidly shrinking. He could not help but curse. The huge sub-body opened its mouth and a tricolored brilliance landed on the 4 objects. Boom! The entire space was shaking. The pillar of great qi, along with some colorful clouds, quickly fell into the objects. The primary formation was retracted and the true appearance of the maze was revealed. This was a rather large space. There were many waves of dermic power in the surroundings. Under the waves of dermic power, there were many forks in the space. In one of the forks, there was the sound of thunder and lightning. Damn it, you dare to play this trick with me. Fine, I'll play with you. I don't believe that I can't capture you. Duanmu Liangsheng was flustered and exasperated. In his heart, on one hand, Xiaohua might be a junior. He wanted to give him face and let Xiaohua go, but Xiaohua did not appreciate it and escaped when he was caught off guard. On the other hand, Xiaohua was only a 4th grade elemental energy cultivator while he was a 5th grade elemental energy cultivator. He had already lost face by dealing with Xiaohua. Now that he let Xiaohua escape, he really did not know how to explain it. Perhaps Duanmu Liangsheng's current mood was turning into anger out of humiliation. However, Duanmu Liangsheng did not expect that the real ending was not what he had imagined. It was his words just now, those words that came from the bottom of his heart, that really saved his life. Not only did Duanmu Liangsheng's pressure not redeem his face, but it also pushed him into the abyss of death. Xiaohua's thunder escape was indeed fast, but the sound it made was also loud. Although there were many forks in the maze, Duanmu Liangsheng could easily chase after Xiaohua. Moreover, because there were so many forks, the speed of the thunder escape was gradually limited. When Xiaohua realized that he had changed to the wind escape, this wind escape was obviously not as fast as the thunder escape. Moreover, Duanmu Liangsheng was also proficient in flying. Although he was unable to catch up with Xiaohua, he was still unable to shake him off. After flying for an hour, Duanmu Liangsheng suddenly realized that Xiaohua had lost his way. Xiaohua had already flown through the same forks more than once. The characteristics of these forks were very obvious. Duanmu Liangsheng only needed to take a glance to distinguish them. Moreover, Xiaohua had actually rushed through them several times. Seeing this, Duanmu Liangsheng's eyes turned and a plan came to his mind. He secretly laid down an origin formation at the side of several forks where Xiaohua would easily appear. Although he could only lay down a part of them each time, he could not stop Xiaohua from flying so many times. Duanmu Liangsheng was so successful that even he himself did not dare to believe it. However, when he saw Xiaohua once again rush through a simple origin formation that he had laid down, Duanmu Liangsheng opened his mouth and a mouthful of true energy fell into the void. Boom! A layer of clouds similar to the twilight emerged from the forks. Waves of awe-inspiring chi mixed with inscriptions blocked Xiaohua's path. Why is there an origin formation in the cloudy mountain maze? When Xiaohua saw the origin formation appear, he was first shocked. When he realized that the awe-inspiring chi in the void came from behind him, he was even more shocked. This old thing. How could he lay down an origin formation in front of me? Just as this thought appeared, Xiaohua's Kunlun mirror appeared again. Boom! Wherever the Kunlun mirror's light beam passed, layers of inscriptions melted. The origin formation that Duanmu Liangsheng had painstakingly laid down earlier was unable to stop Xiaohua. Now, how could a simple defensive formation that was hastily laid down be a match for the Kunlun mirror? Xiaohua's figure rushed through the origin formation. His eyes slightly narrowed, and the corners of his mouth curled into a mischievous smile. With a wave of his hand, dozens of fire talismans immediately flew to the surroundings of the secret passage. Then, Xiaohua laid down another restriction in the secret passage and rushed into the distance again. This little guy's cultivation is ordinary, but his ability to escape is extraordinary. Seeing this broken origin formation, although Duanmu Liangsheng didn't think that a simple origin formation would be able to trap Xiaohua, he merely wanted to use the origin formation to delay for a while. He couldn't help but smile bitterly to himself. However, he didn't remove the origin formation because he knew that if nothing unexpected happened, Xiaohua would return to this place soon. Unfortunately, just as he rushed through the origin formation, he felt an obscure transcendence energy appear. Duanmu Liangsheng was slightly startled. He knew that he had touched some kind of restriction. He hurriedly urged his figure to retreat. Rumble! Xiaohua's most adept fire talisman star formation had already rushed towards Duanmu Liangsheng. Duanmu Liangxing waved his hand, and a tsunami-like awe-inspiring qi immediately wrapped around these exploding fire talismans. However, not only was this exploding energy powerful, it was also tricky. It was almost all-pervasive. As long as Duanmu Liangxing's defense was the slightest bit weak, that energy would immediately drill into it. In particular, this secret passage had the restriction of the Misty Mountain Maze formation. When that wave of qi rushed into the restriction still had the power to counterattack. It was as if Duanmu Liangxing had touched the restriction of the Misty Mountain Maze formation. For a moment, Duanmu Liangxing was in a very sorry state. Even his Confucian attire was somewhat tattered. When he flew out from the smoke with his face covered in dust, Xiaohua had already fled far away. Xiaohua! Duanmu Liangxing let out a long shout. The clouds under his feet actually gave birth to sword light. If this old man doesn't capture you today, this old man's surname isn't Duanmu. Unfortunately, how could Xiaohua hear him? Just as Xiaohua heard the faint sound of an explosion, a bright light flashed in his mind. He instantly understood how Duanmu Liangxing had laid down the origin formation. Seeing that another fork in the road had appeared, he was just about to rush into one of them. Then he immediately stopped, picked the one at the edge, and flew in. Furthermore, in order to create a diversion, Xiaohua had even specially used the Devil Realm's concealment technique. It's just that Xiaohua's hundreds of plans, after he had flown for the time it took to eat a meal, his figure had just turned out from a secret passage, and before he could recognize the other forks, he saw layer after layer of inscriptions covering the sky and covering the earth like grasshoppers, all of a sudden enveloping Xiaohua within. As Xiaohua's figure was blocked, layers of vast qi waves rushed out from the rock walls, drowning Xiaohua. A kind of vast power tightly shackled Xiaohua. Duanmu Liangxing. Xiaohua was flustered and exasperated. He shouted loudly, "This Xiao only feels that you are a straightforward person, different from Duanmu Qing's narrow-mindedness. This is why this Xiao doesn't want to meet you in a life-and-death battle. Since you are forcing me step by step, this Xiao will make you fearful at every step. Today you will die here." As he spoke, the top of Xiaohua's head spouted out a tricolored cloud. An abundant power pushed away the vast qi that was binding Xiaohua. Xiaohua's figure flashed with a dark golden brilliance, and his transcendence golden body was displayed. Woo! Just as Xiaohua's tricolored true qi rushed out, the entire origin formation emitted a strange sound. All the noble qi crazily trembled, and along with the trembling, a very small wind sound was born. Soon after, layers upon layers of noble qi began to rotate, and a huge rotating passage was born in front of Xiaohua. This passage was perfectly straight, and it seemed to lead to the inside of the rock walls. It also seemed to be the end of the secret passage. No, this isn't Duanmu Old Ghost's origin formation. Doubts arose in Xiaohua's heart, but he didn't have time to think too much. The revolving passage had a force that he couldn't resist pushing him forward. Moreover, in the distance, he felt an extremely familiar feeling. Chapter 3752. Xiaohua wanted to activate the lightning escape technique, but unfortunately, he couldn't activate the magic power in his meridians. His nascent soul was also imprisoned in his lower dantian. Only the true qi in his middle dantian was abnormally lively. This is really an origin array. Xiaohua understood. However, this wasn't set up by Duanmu Liangxing. It should be the origin array set up by Senior Tsang Longzi. Thinking that this was an origin array set up by Tsang Longzi and the bone tempering technique he obtained from the stone wall, Xiaohua couldn't help but look forward to the familiar feeling in the distance. In his heart, he secretly pondered what this familiar feeling was. Xiaohua thought of many possibilities, but when he arrived at this misty space and saw countless dark green clouds condensed into mountains, trees, beasts, and city walls, he couldn't help but cry out in surprise. In the middle of the clouds, he saw a turtle shell that looked like the noon sun embedded in it. The turtle shell emitted a dark green color, and a vigorous aura filled the entire space. All the creatures condensed from clouds and mist seemed to be worshipping this brilliance. Turtle shell? Heaven's heart? Xiaohua groaned and couldn't help but open his mouth. This turtle shell was actually hidden here. Looking at the brilliance and clouds, there must be a heaven's heart inside. Senior Zhonglangzi's divine ability is so great he actually hid the heaven's heart of a Confucian cultivator in this misty mountain maze formation. No wonder Confucian cultivators couldn't find the heaven's heart in the hidden immortal continent. Even Xian, a disciple of a Confucian family, only had half a heaven's heart. No wonder the misty mountain maze formation's protection is so tight. If it wasn't for this maze formation, how could it protect the heaven's heart for thousands of years? If I didn't first activate the true qi in my chest and conceal the heaven's heart's aura, I'm afraid this origin array might not have brought me here. With a thought, Xiaohua slapped the top of his head, and the tricolored heart of heaven rushed out of his dantian along with his zhenqi. The tricolored brilliance fell on the spatial clouds, and with the dark green color, it actually became a multicolored brilliance. Even though the wanxiang in this space was condensed from clouds, it looked extremely similar to an ordinary object. When he looked at the tricolor heaven's heart again, it was attracted by the aura of the tortoise shell. It turned into a stream and landed near the tortoise shell, surrounding it. Fellow Taoist, quickly let me out. At this moment, the scholarly cultivator Xiaohua's voice trembled slightly, and he said anxiously, I seem to have understood a little. That's right, this really is the essence of Confucian cultivation. Xiaohua was also overjoyed. He hurriedly patted his chest with his hand. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua charged into the space with his sword light. His tricolored body immediately produced a powerful suction force. Wind swirled and clouds surged. The objects formed by the surrounding clouds were all shattered and then rushed into Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's body. Swish, swish, swish. There was a soft sound like falling leaves. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's body couldn't help but swell. When Xiaohua grew to 100 meters tall, he opened his mouth and a stream of qi fell on the tortoise shell and the tricolor heaven's heart. 4 rays of light rushed into them. The light around Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's body flashed rapidly. His body slowly shrank until it was the same size as Xiaohua. If it weren't for some differences in skin that were difficult to distinguish, this Confucian cultivator Xiaohua would be almost exactly the same as Xiaohua. Although Confucian cultivator Xiaohua shrank, he didn't open his eyes. The aura of the tortoise shell didn't disappear because it entered Xiaohua's body. Instead, because of the tricolor heaven's heart, this aura became even denser and gradually filled the entire space. Namo Maitreya Buddha. Xiaohua very untimely chanted the name of Buddha, and his body slowly retreated to the side. At this time, Confucian cultivator Xiaohua replaced Xiaohua. At this time, Confucian cultivator Xiaohua didn't have the appearance of standing out like before. He also didn't have the sword qi that could pierce the sky. All of the sword shapes had disappeared, and only a scholarly robe that seemed to be condensed from the pages of a book was on his body. Although there were still armor inscriptions flashing in his eyes, the inscriptions had a kind of upright and plain-spoken aura that was far stronger than that of an ordinary scholarly cultivator. A slender sword was casually hanging from Xiaohua's waist. There was a scabbard on the sword, and the scabbard was still in the shape of a scroll. Faintly, an incomparably sharp sword qi would seep out from the gaps between the scabbard. The 8 flying swords that formed Confucian cultivator Xiaohua had all condensed into one. The originally very obvious heart-shaped sword intent was now also hidden in Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's body. The sharp edge was no longer suitable for the mediocre Confucian cultivator Xiaohua, and could no longer show the mature Confucian cultivator Xiaohua. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua raised his hands, and his scholarly robe fluttered in the wind. The clouds and mist in the entire space seemed to spread through the entire space with Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's perception, and the clouds and mist in the entire space began to slowly change under Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's perception. At first, the transformation was extremely slow, as if it was stagnant. The entire space was deathly still. After an unknown period of time, perhaps a gust of wind blew, and a grass seed moved. This grass seed broke out of the ground and grew into a blade of grass. Then, thousands upon thousands of grass seeds moved, and thousands upon thousands of blades of grass grew out of the ground. A blade of grass, a tree, a mountain, a city, the chicken, a dog, a cow, a person, a speck of dust, a ray of light, a star, a world. There were more and more things in the entire space, and the changes became faster and faster. In the end, all things turned into flowing lights that flashed around Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua. After an unknown amount of time, all the flowing lights suddenly stopped. Then, with a boom, a burst of silent rumbling sounds, and the entire space was fragmented and destroyed. All things turned into a rotating cloud and mist. This rotating cloud and mist drew a strange arc in the air and fell on top of Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's head. Although Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua still hadn't opened his eyes, the cloud and mist fell down and merged into Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's body without any resistance. The cloud and mist was like the finishing touch. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's body gradually emitted a multicolored light from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. When an indescribable liveliness and vitality appeared in Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's eyes, a scroll slowly unfolded in a certain place in the space and spread to Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's feet. Congratulations, fellow immortal. Xiao Hua flew to Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's expression and cupped his hands with a smile. A solemn expression appeared on Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's face. He returned the greeting and said, "Congratulations, congratulations." However, it seems that fellow immortal still hasn't completely grasped the true essence of Confucian cultivation. There are still many questions that you don't understand. Xiao Hua's tone changed as he asked, "Fellow immortal." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's face vividly showed bitterness. This is the true essence of cultivation that countless Confucian cultivators diligently seek. You and I came from a Taoist sect. Now that we have the fortune of being able to peek into the mysteries of heaven, what are you still not satisfied with? Right now, you and I have 4 of the 5 heavenly hearts. When we find the last heavenly heart, you and I will be able to gather the 5 energies and truly understand the secret of Confucian cultivation. Even if we gather all 5 heavenly hearts, I fear that it will still be difficult to find the true secret. Xiao Hua shook his head. If it was only the gathering of the 5 heavenly hearts, how could the 5 heavenly hearts fall apart? Wouldn't Confucian cultivators do everything possible to protect these 5 heavenly hearts? Who knows? Let's wait until we find the last heavenly heart. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua looked at the scroll at his feet and said with a smile, "We should leave this ancient maze as soon as possible. If Confucian cultivators find out that the heavenly heart is inside the Misty Mountain maze, I fear that the Immortal Palace will send immortal soldiers and immortal generals to tear this Misty Mountain maze apart from the inside out. All right, fellow immortal, please return to your position." Xiao Hua patted the top of his head. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's figure turned into 3-colored true energy and disappeared inside. Immediately after, Xiao Hua took the soaring dragon shears inside his Taoist robe and stepped on the scroll. His whole body followed the rotation of the scroll and flew forward. At this moment, Xiao Hua was really looking forward to it. The 2 maze formations gave him endless benefits. He couldn't imagine what kind of treasures he would be able to obtain in Cang Longzi's immortal cave. Moreover, he finally understood why Zhai Xingzi and Zhang Daoran were willing to risk their lives to break into this great formation. Because the greater the risk, the greater the reward. This trip to Cang Longzi's immortal cave was more rewarding than all of Xiao Hua's adventures. However, Xiao Hua, who had been blinded by happiness, still thought too simply. Of course, in this immortal cave of Senior Dujie, everything was a treasure for the cultivators of the Tao sect, and they were rarely seen. But in fact, how could things that were suitable for cultivation and use be so easy to obtain? For example, the few things that Xiao Hua had obtained. The bone tempering technique of the dragon clan, the turtle shell that hid the heavenly heart, the spiritual intelligence that was used to cultivate the scattered nascent soul, the escape technique of the 5 elements, and the pill concoction method. Which of these 4 things could be used by ordinary cultivators? Cultivating the bone tempering technique of the dragon clan? Not to mention that human cultivators couldn't cultivate it. Even if they did, they would end up with their bones broken and their flesh torn apart. As for the turtle shell, even G-Man of Meng Mountain couldn't figure out its secrets. How could ordinary Confucian cultivators and Taoist cultivators find anything strange about it? Compared to the turtle shell, the spiritual intelligence was even rarer. If Xiaohua didn't have the opportunity to obtain Mo Yuntong from Xianzongzi, and if Xiaohua didn't have the memories of Huang Yi and the others, how could he have obtained them? If that was the case, it was all thanks to Cang Longzi for collecting so many things, and even more thanks to Xiaohua, who was both a Confucian cultivator and a Buddhist cultivator, that he was able to turn these useless things into treasures. In fact, when it came to the real Taoist cultivation technique, Cang Longzi's understanding of cultivation, Xiaohua didn't even touch the edge of it. Suppressing his excited little heart, Xiaohua flew along with the scroll, and his figure slowly disappeared. However, when Xiaohua flew out from the stone wall and saw everything in front of him, he couldn't help but cry out, "Are you kidding me? Why did I return to the original immortal cave?" That's right. Once again, what Xiaohua didn't expect was that although the stone wall he flew out from was not the previous one, the immortal cave he fell into was still the same one. The platform where Xiaohua took away the jade table was also empty. The jade wave that Xiaohua took away from the spiritual intelligence was also empty. The entire immortal cave was empty, just like when Xiaohua left. Chapter 3753. It looks like I've taken the wrong path again. Xiaohua's gaze swept across the cave and landed on the 4 different entrances. He didn't panic, as if it would be strange if he didn't go the wrong way. However, he thought to himself, if I want to find the real cave, I'm afraid I have to choose another entrance. After thinking for a bit, Xiaohua took out the Kunlun mirror and sent Fairy Xiangfeng out. Fairy Xiangfeng's face still had a sad expression. She didn't look anywhere else but stared at Xiaohua as if there was still hatred in her heart. Cough cough. Xiaohua coughed twice and said with a smile, "Fairy Xiangfeng, although this Xiao killed Reverend Xiang Tian, but now I have saved you several times. In terms of gratitude and grudges, you and I are even. Just like what I said in the spirit sense space, you don't have to thank me. I don't expect you to let go of your hatred in such a short time. However, what I want to tell you is that there is a limit to my tolerance. I can tolerate it once, but I can't tolerate it 3 times. If you still can't let it go in the end and want to attack me, then I definitely won't be merciful. If that's the case, why did you save me?" Fairy Xiangfeng's expression didn't change as she asked. "AI, it's not easy for a person to live. Even ants struggle to live. Fairy has cultivated for thousands of years. Why do you want to die for some things that you can't cross?" Xiaohua knew that Fairy Xiangfeng's impulse to kill herself had passed and she might not kill herself. He sighed and said, "The reason why we cultivators are cultivators is to separate ourselves from love and go against the heavens. Fairy's past was because you were too involved in the love of the world. That's why you're in this situation now. Fairy should think about the essence of cultivation and comprehend what you've gained from the Misty Mountain Maze formation." Fairy Xiangfeng sighed softly. Magic powers surged around her body, and her figure and face changed slightly. Soon she returned to her female form. Fairy Xiangfeng raised her eyes and looked around. Shock flashed in her eyes. After a while, she looked at Xiaohua and said, "What Taoist Xiao said makes sense. However, my mind is in a mess right now and I might not be able to listen. This time, I gained a lot from Senior Cang Longzi's cave. Not only did I gain some enlightenment, but I also obtained the spirit tool on the jade table. If what you said is true, I might be able to reach the leaving aperture stage if I cultivate in peace. However, it's easier said than done. Since you know how to do it, then do it. It's better than thinking about the past." Xiaohua could only comfort him. Fairy Xiangfeng sighed and said, "Sigh, if only there was unruffled water in this world, how great would that be?" Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, but when he thought about Zhai Xingzi and Gusuqiodi, he knew that the forgotten emotions water might not be useful. But then, Xiaohua smiled and said, "To be honest, Fairy, this Xiao knows of a place called Heartbreak Mountain. It has the forgotten emotions water that you are thinking of. Is that true?" Fairy Xiangfeng's face was filled with disbelief. After Xiaohua told her the location of Heartbreak Mountain, Fairy Xiang Feng nodded as if there was hope. Thank you, Taoist Xiao. Once I leave this place, I will immediately go to Heartbreak Mountain. Alright. Xiao Hua smiled faintly, his heart at ease. Since the poor Fairy Xiang Feng had a glimmer of hope, even if this glimmer of hope was shattered, who knows how many years later, even if Fairy Xiang Feng were to think about it again, she might not have the will to die now, right? Since she had a goal, Fairy Xiang Feng looked around and said with a smile, Taoist Xiao, you are indeed lost. We should have already entered this place before, right? Indeed. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This Xiao knows that I don't have the ability to break the maze, so I let you out and let you decide. Isn't it enough to go to the other 3 passages? There has to be an exit. Fairy Xiang Feng asked with some surprise. You don't need me to remind you of this, do you? Perhaps. Xiao Hua shook his head. This Xiao is not sure myself, so I asked you, and the other disciples to come out and let them decide for themselves. With that, Xiao Hua let Fu Jiwen and Xue Ping out. Everyone saw that they were still in the cave, but the others were gone, and there was an additional nascent soul female cultivator. They were all astonished. Xue Ping and the rest even felt that they had not left the cave. However, they did not dare to ask too much, and went forward to greet Fairy Xiang Feng. Fairy Xiang Feng waved her hand slightly, not paying much attention to them. When Xiao Hua finished explaining the ins and outs of the matter, everyone understood. Xue Ping smiled and said, since that is the case, Senior can choose another passage. We have no objections. It's different. Xiao Hua smiled slightly, and his eyes swept across the stone wall that he had just flown down. Seeing that there was no movement, he knew that Duanmu Liangsheng had not caught up. He said, this Xiao's choice is different from everyone's, so I asked Fairy Xiang Feng to bring everyone to find their own opportunities. Oh, Taoist Xiao, you mean? Fairy Xiang Feng frowned. You won't choose the passage with us? Yes, that's right. Xiao Hua's gaze turned to the stone wall again, and he smiled bitterly. This Xiao has some difficulties that I cannot say here. Now that time is of the essence, I think you should choose a passage and bring these disciples in. Others might not be able to sense Xiao Hua's uneasiness, but how could Fairy Xiang Feng not see it? She already knew that after she entered the Kunlun mirror, Xiao Hua would definitely encounter something. She probed, Taoist Xiao, don't you need my help? Do you still have any strength left? Xiao Hua asked back. Sigh, all right. Fairy Xiang Feng was helpless, and similarly looked at the stone wall that Xiao Hua had looked at. She stood up and came to a passage that looked like a water droplet, and said, this old one will choose this. If any disciple wishes to follow, then come over. However, this old one cannot guarantee your safety like Taoist Xiao. Why not? Xue Ping hesitated slightly and said, we wait here for other seniors and fellow Taoists who have gone the wrong way? It's best not to. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. He did not wish to implicate these cultivators because of his grudge with the Duanmu family, and similarly, he did not wish for them to see his fight with the Duanmu family. Although Xiao Hua's words were tactful, his tone was very certain. Xue Ping and the rest saw that there was no room for doubt, and did not dare to disobey, and walked behind Fairy Xiang Feng. This old one will leave now. Fairy Xiang Feng nodded toward Xiao Hua, and brought Xue Ping and the rest into the passage. Seeing that everyone had left, Fu Jiwen respectfully asked, Master, what kind of strong enemy did you encounter? To actually hide like this, and let Fairy Xiang Feng bring fellow Taoist Xue Ping and the rest into the passage? Damn it. Xiao Hua scratched his head, and cursed, it's our old enemy. Duanmu Qing? Fu Jiwen immediately understood, and an apologetic expression appeared on his face. He bowed and said, this disciple has made things difficult for Master. There's no need for that. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said with a smile, since you are this old one's disciple, your matter is naturally this old one's matter. Moreover, that person from the Duanmu family might not be this old one's match. This old one just did not want to bother with him. Oh. Fu Jiwen smiled. Since Master is not afraid of the people from the Duanmu family, why did you let these disciples leave? If Fairy Xiang Feng was by the side, she would be of help no matter what. Xiao Hua laughed coldly. Fairy Xiang Feng is Yun Mingzi. During the Jade Pavilion banquet, I killed her lover, Taoist Xiang Tian. Do you think I can be at ease with her by my side? See. Xiao Hua's words immediately woke Fu Jiwen up. There was no need for Xiao Hua to explain anything else. Fu Jiwen already understood the strangeness of the matter. Thinking of the previous fairy Su Ming, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. There's also Xue Ping. Xiao Hua's gaze didn't leave the stone wall that he just landed on, and at the same time he was secretly on guard. He said, Master is not afraid of the people from the Duanmu family, but Master can't guarantee that nothing will happen to me. The person who is coming is a mid-tier 5th grade Essence Force Grandmaster. If Master were to slip up and get captured, or if some other accident happens, wouldn't Master be holding him back? It's better not to involve others with this kind of karma. Fu Jiwen sucked in another breath as if he had a toothache. He had already made it clear that he wouldn't bring Xue Ping and the rest to risk their lives, but when he heard that the person who came was a 5th grade Essence Force, how could he not be surprised? However, you are Master's disciple. Even if it's a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, you have to follow Master through water and tread on fire. Xiao Hua said with a smile. This is a disciple's duty. Fu Jiwen replied respectfully. All right, Xiao Hua clapped his hands and took out the soul extermination vital light. He looked at it proudly and said, It's a pity that this treasure has been refined for too short a time and has yet to reach the level of a spiritual tool. Otherwise, why would I be afraid of a 5th grade Essence Force Confucian cultivator? Then what should I do? Fu Jiwen asked softly. You are a Confucian cultivator. This Duanmu Liang Sheng from the Duanmu family seems to be a straightforward person. He doesn't know who you are, so he might not make things difficult for you. Xiao Hua smiled mysteriously. If something happens to Master, you can still help Master, right? Yes, disciple understands. Fu Jiwen blinked his eyes and gave an extremely sinister laugh. He didn't have anything else, but if the Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal came out at the crucial moment, the lightning on it would probably make Duanmu Liang Sheng suffer the consequences, right? However, Xiao Hua held the soul extermination vital light and waited for a long time. Not to mention that there was no movement from the stone wall, even the other cultivators did not turn around. Damn it, could it be that that guy also got some dog's hit luck? What kind of opportunity did he encounter? Xiao Hua was a little irritated. Fu Jiwen, who was at the side, was calm and reminded in a low voice, Master, the Heaven Punishment Prison Crystal's lightning punishment seems to be coming again. Yes, let's wait a little longer. Xiao Hua waved his hand. His eyes probed the interior of the cave. When his eyes once again landed on the brown bear-like cave entrance, his eyes rotated as he asked, Fu Jiwen, do you still remember the path that we took earlier? Chapter 3754. Yes, this disciple remembers. Fu Jiwen was indeed smart. He understood Xiao Hua's intentions and replied sinisterly, Master, are you planning to follow his escape route? If you want to hurry up. Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and withdrew the soul execution yuan light. He shouted, when he returns, naturally. No, even if he returns, he won't wait here. He will definitely find another passage. We will definitely be safe if we take the original passage. But the dangers we encountered on the way. Fu Jiwen probed in a low voice, Master, are you still confident? Master has many methods. Xiao Hua proudly said, you just have to wait and see. Alright Master, please. Fu Jiwen raised his hand. Although Xiao Hua didn't recognize the way, he had already memorized the dangers of the secret passage. He wasn't afraid of the divine sense space. Not to mention the Jade Blood Core Transformation secret technique, his Buddhist awareness and soul awareness were more than enough. Xiao Hua walked to the entrance of the cave and looked at the stone wall one last time. There was still no movement. He wanted to set up some traps here, but he was afraid that Zhai Xingzi and the others would encounter them when they returned. He simply didn't think too much about it and walked into the cave with Fu Jiwen with his head held high. However, he had never expected that when Xiao Hua stepped into the cave, he would be stunned in an instant. He had a dumbstruck expression. Even Fujiwen, who accompanied Xiao Huan, had the same expression. Because in front of them wasn't the secret passage they entered before, but rather a rather large cave. This cave was similar to an ordinary cave. It was about 100 zhang in size. There were stone tables and chairs inside, as well as some strange carvings. What was special was that there was a cloud bed at the head of the cave. On top of the cloud bed was a small jade table. Motherfucker. Xiao Hua slapped his own forehead and said regretfully as if he had been enlightened, Master should have thought of this long ago. How could Master have chosen the wrong path? I have already passed Senior Tsang Lang Zi's test twice. After this cave is naturally the inner cave. Yes, Master is right. Fu Jiwen secretly laughed in his heart. He understood very well that Xiao Hua couldn't possibly think this way. In fact, no one could possibly think this way. Anyone who reached the outer layer of the abode would choose another path to continue searching for the inner layer of the abode. Xiao Hua only came to the inner layer of the abode by accident because he wanted to avoid his enemies. However, he didn't know how many chances there were to enter the inner layer of the abode. If there was only one chance, Zhai Xingzi, Zhang Daoren, Sun Kong Shangren and the others probably wouldn't be able to enter again. Of course, Fu Jiwen also knew that since Tsang Longzi had set up such a trap here, it was highly likely that no one else would be able to enter. It seemed that Xiao Hua had also thought of this. Looking at the smile on Fu Jiwen's face, Xiao Hua couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. Ah, my disciple, take your time to search. In the future, within this cave, even if other people come, they won't be able to obtain anything. A master is right. Fu Jiwen also laughed. Senior Tsang Longzi's cave abode is really too dangerous. Since I was able to come here with Master, I will definitely get back what we have sacrificed. Rest assured, Master. That's Master's good disciple. Xiao Hua laughed and released his Buddhist sense. However, what puzzled Xiao Hua was that within the abode, his Buddhist sense was actually imprisoned. My disciple, what about your eye-clearing technique and divine sense technique? Xiao Hua turned around and asked. Fu Jiwen honestly replied, Master, I can't use them. Strange. Xiao Hua pinched his chin and was very puzzled. What does Senior Tsang Longzi mean? Why does he have to imprison his divine sense in his own cave abode? Master, it should be that Senior Tsang Longzi set up the restriction after he left. Fu Jiwen reminded. That's not what I meant. Xiao Hua frowned and said, what I meant was, what does Senior Tsang Longzi want to do? In the secret passage and the outer layer of the abode, it was to test our strength. Does he still need to do it here? It shouldn't be necessary, right? Fu Jiwen looked around and said tentatively, unless Senior Tsang Longzi has another cave abode. It doesn't seem like there's another one. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. There's already a cloud bed here. Oh, where are the two entrances? If I'm not mistaken, there should be a pill room, a herb garden, or a place for refining tools. There shouldn't be another cave abode. At this point, Xiao Hua came back to his senses and patted his head. Look at Master, what am I thinking? Go quickly. You go that way and Master will go this way. See if there's anything in the cave abode and take it all. Yes, disciple understands. Disciple will not leave behind even a single jade eye. Fu Jiwen obediently replied. No. Xiao Hua waved his hand and released his soul consciousness to explore the entire cave abode. Although Tsang Longzi was a tribulation-passing cultivator with endless means, he still couldn't completely seal off his soul consciousness. This cave abode was only 100 feet in size. Xiao Hua's soul consciousness swept through it and saw everything clearly. After Xiao Hua looked around, he felt a little disappointed. The entire cave abode was divided into 3 parts. The outer layer was near the stone wall. There were some jade shelves, but there were few things on them. Not only were there no ink cloud eyes that Xiao Hua expected, there wasn't even a jade bottle. On the other hand, there were 1 or 2 scattered magic tools on Fu Jiwen's side, but they didn't seem to be of excellent quality. The middle part was filled with jade chairs and other things. There were also some jade tables, which seemed to be used to entertain guests. There were also some jade plates and jade plates on them. However, these jade plates and jade plates were empty. Not to mention spirit fruits, there wasn't even a fruit pit. The remaining part was naturally where the cloud bed was. The cloud bed seemed to be a part of the stone wall. From afar, it looked like a protruding part of the stone wall. There was a jade table on top of it, and on top of it was a small jade rui. It seemed to be placed very casually. Seeing this, Xiaohua suddenly lost interest. He curled his lips and secretly cursed, "Senior Zonglongzi, you're too stingy, aren't you? It wasn't easy for this junior to come here. Why didn't you leave behind any benefits? Could it be that you put all the good things in the cave abode in the maze to test the juniors?" Although Xiaohua complained, he also understood that he had gained a lot through the 2 layers of maze. Zhang Daoren, Sun Kong Shengren, Zhai Xing Zi, Gusu Qiudi, Gong Shu Isin, and even Fairy Xiang Feng and Duanmu Liang Xing must have gained something. Since everyone had gained something, then the treasures in Tsang Longzi's cave abode were actually enough. It didn't matter whether Tsang Longzi put things in the inner layer of the cave abode or not. This Xiao understands. Xiaohua looked around the entire immortal's cave and had an idea in his heart. He said loudly, "Disciple, don't look around here. Quickly go. There are several magic tools on that jade shelf. Take them and go directly to the entrance." Tsang Longzi put all the things in the cave abode in the maze. Yes, this disciple understands. Fu Jiwen hurriedly nodded and rushed to the jade shelves Xiaohua pointed at. Xiaohua didn't pay any attention to the things in the cave abode and went straight to the entrance on the cloud bed. There weren't any restrictions on the entrance. It was just a long passage. Xiaohua's soul sense didn't find anything special. But when his soul sense came to the passage, Xiaohua's face was full of excitement. As expected. Xiaohua quickened his pace. Senior Tsang Longzi didn't put anything in the inner layer of the cave abode. But there are good things in his pill room. Or maybe Senior Tsang Longzi didn't think of these things as good things. Xiaohua didn't wait until he reached the exit of the passage. He impatiently used his soul sense to scan the pill room. When he entered the pill room, he didn't hesitate to walk to the stone wall of the pill room. He saw that the stone wall was filled with irregular grids. Most of them were empty. Only about 30% of the grids were filled with jade bottles. But when Xiaohua saw the jade bottles, he was slightly stunned, because there were some words written randomly on the jade bottles. They were of different sizes. What surprised Xiaohua was that these words were actually very similar to the words of the Dawn Rain continent. Xiaohua could almost understand what kind of pills were inside at a glance. It wasn't until now that Xiaohua realized that the words used in Senior Tsang Longzi's cave abode were the words of the Dawn Rain continent. Thinking of this, Xiaohua hurriedly took out the ink bottle he got from the cave abode in front of him and checked it again. Sure enough, the words inside were really similar to the words of the Dawn Rain continent's Taoist sect. Xiaohua was too happy before and didn't notice it. It seems. Xiaohua put away the ink bottle and thought to himself, the Dawn Rain continent's Taoist sect must have retreated from the hidden immortal continent. No, from the 3 continents. In other words, the 3 continents' immortals and Buddhas didn't destroy the Taoist sect. Our Taoist sect just went to another realm. From then on, we were separated from the 3 continents' Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sections. Similarly, the Dawn Rain continent's Buddhism annihilation isn't completely correct. It's just that the Taoist sect, that's not right. If our Taoist sect retreated to the Dawn Rain continent's realm, then how do we explain the Buddhist sect's ruins on the Dawn Rain continent? Could it be that the Buddhist sect and Confucian cultivators chased the Taoist sect to the Dawn Rain continent's realm? Thinking of this, Xiaohua couldn't help but gasp. His eyes widened and he almost cried out, Could it be that the Dawn Rain continent was originally a part of the 3 continents? No, it's one of the 4 great continents? Xiaohua was completely stunned. His gaze was fixed on the words on the jade bottles. His mind was spinning rapidly again. That's right. If the Buddhist sect and Confucian cultivators didn't cross realms to chase the Taoist sect to the Dawn Rain continent, then there was another possibility. The Dawn Rain continent, the hidden immortal continent, the Western Paradise, and the Thousand Demons' sacred realm were all in the same realm. However, the Dawn Rain continent where the Taoist sect was entrenched was separated from the 3 continents where the Confucian, Buddhist, and demon sects were. The place that was separated in the middle was Xiao Hua's Kuei-ha-si. It was the three great formations that Xiao Hua encountered at the bottom of Kuei-ha-si, the Great Meru Buddhist Formation, the Five Elements Annihilation Formation, and the Clear Time Demon Formation. Chapter 3755. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. After all, his current strength was already comparable to the upper fifth grade of essence energy. Moreover, he was currently in the great formation set up by the tribulation-passing cultivator Tsong Langzi. Although the power of this misty mountain maze formation was extremely great, even if it was 10 times or 100 times stronger, it still couldn't compare to the three great formations Xiao Hua encountered before. That kind of formation was definitely not something that could be done by humans. Moreover, if the Dawn Rain continent and the three continents were not on the same plane, it would be easier for Xiao Hua to return to the Dawn Rain continent. However, if the Dawn Rain continent and the three continents were separated by humans, no matter if it was Tao sect cultivators, Confucian cultivators, or Buddhist disciples, they couldn't find or break these three great formations. Moreover, the three great formations had already been submerged in the dust of time. With Xiao Hua's cultivation, how could he find them again? Therefore, Xiao Hua very naturally chose the former possibility. He even consoled himself with a bitter smile. How could there be a cultivator in this world who could set up such a large formation? Not to mention tribulation passing, even a Mahayana cultivator. Speaking of this, Xiao Hua was dumbfounded again. These words were definitely self-deceiving. Because the three continents and the Dawn Rain continent indeed didn't have cultivators who could set up such a large formation, but what about outside the three continents and the Dawn Rain continent? What about outside this so-called cultivation world? Xiao Hua didn't dare to imagine. Heavens! Xiao Hua grabbed his hair and said with a bitter smile, I just want to live on the hidden immortal continent and find my home. That's right. After being distressed, Xiao Hua's eyes suddenly lit up. If the Dawn Rain continent and the three continents are on the same plane, then wouldn't it be more likely that my home is on the hidden immortal continent? That is to say, as long as I find my home, I can also find the way to the Dawn Rain continent? It seems that once this matter is over, I'll hurry back to the Black Cloud Ridge and help the Jiang country's princess establish a country. Then, I'll leave the country's affairs to Xiong Yi and Li Xiang. I'll bring some disciples to find Lu Zhen. Now that he had a clue about his home, Xiao Hua's mood was very good. He threw the matter that had nothing to do with him to the back of his mind, and his gaze once again fell on the grid where the jade bottle was placed. There were restrictions on these lattices, but what made Xiao Hua happy was that the lattices were simple restrictions in order to protect the jade bottles and the pills inside. Although these restrictions were unfamiliar to Xiao Hua, they were nothing in Xiao Hua's eyes. Xiao Hua easily broke these restrictions, then he took all the jade bottles and stored them inside the space. Then, Xiao Hua took out the ink cloud pupil and placed it on his forehead. After looking at it for a moment, he waved his hand and took out a jade bottle. The words, Vitality Pill, were written on top of the jade bottle. However, his handwriting was very sloppy. It could be seen that Tsong Langzi wrote it casually. This vitality pill is in Senior Tsong Langzi's ink cloud pupil. It's a pill used by spirit-severing cultivators to repair their spiritual sense. However, I don't know if the spirit-severing cultivators in Senior Tsong Langzi's eyes are the same as the ones in the Dawn Rain continent. Xiao Hua was a bit hesitant, but after a moment, Xiao Hua felt relieved. This Xiao's spiritual sense has been tempered by the rockfall matrix, and now it has far surpassed the nascent soul stage. It has even surpassed the spirit-severing stage in the Dawn Rain continent. Even if this pill is not suitable, this Xiao has a secret technique to guard against it. This Xiao can use the Jade Blood Pill core to repair my spiritual sense, but it consumes a lot of magic power. It's not suitable. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua activated his spiritual sense secret technique and swallowed the vitality pill. Boom! This really made Xiao Hua overjoyed. Although this pill had been stored for thousands of years, it did not lose its effect under the restriction. The medicinal power dissolved, and immediately, an indescribable flow rushed into his Naiwan palace. This feeling was very similar to the Jade Blood Pill core. Good. Xiao Hua felt his spiritual sense slowly recover and praised, Senior Zonglongzi's alchemy technique is really marvelous. In a moment, I still have to see if Mo Yuntong was left behind in the cave. After swallowing the vitality pill, Xiao Hua put the other jade bottles into his space and carefully stored them away. There were too many gains from the Misty Mountain maze, and he needed time to properly organize them. As for the current green-robed Xiao Hua, not only did he need to refine his spiritual tool, he also needed to comprehend the 5 elements escape technique. Where would he have the extra time? With the gains, Xiao Hua's heart relaxed, and he turned to look at the other places in the alchemy room. Since it was an alchemy room, there was naturally an earth fire and alchemy room. However, in the middle of the alchemy room, the earth fire was completely extinguished, and there was no flame. Not to mention, there was no alchemy furnace above the earth fire. The precious pills and alchemy furnace must be used by Senior Zonglongzi himself, and he must have taken them away. Xiao Hua nodded inwardly. He then looked at the cave entrance that was connected to the pill room. That cave entrance's restriction actually blocked even his soul sense. Clearly, it was very important. Xiao Hua already understood what that place was. Outside this cave entrance is a medicinal garden. Xiao Hua checked again to make sure he didn't miss anything in the alchemy room, and then walked to the entrance of the cave. The restriction that blocked his spiritual sense didn't stop Xiao Hua's figure, and when he stepped into the cave, his heart filled with anticipation was once again satisfied. It wasn't beyond his expectations. The herb garden in Zonglongzi's cave was also inside the array, and the space inside the array seemed to be several hundred li wide. What surprised Xiao Hua the most was that the heaven-earth yuan qi inside this space was especially abundant, far surpassing that of the outside of the cave. Spirit Gathering Array? The name of this array suddenly appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, and then the array also appeared in Xiao Hua's mind, but when Xiao Hua released his spiritual sense and looked at the space, he slightly shook his head. This seems to be similar to a spirit gathering array, but not quite the same. Unfortunately, there isn't any array jade slip here, otherwise this Xiao Hua would be able to comprehend it. Even if there isn't one here, who knows if there isn't one in another place. I don't know if this little guy Fu Jiwen has such an opportunity. Yes, Zonglongzi was a master of arrays, and Xiao Hua didn't believe that he didn't leave some array jade slips in his cave. Unfortunately, although this herb garden is very big, most of the spiritual herbs in the herb garden have already been taken away by Senior Zonglongzi, leaving less than 10% behind. Xiao Hua's spiritual sense swept over and saw clearly, and then he bitterly smiled. These spiritual herbs may be rare in the eyes of others, but in this Xiao Hua's eyes, they aren't anything. What is this? Just as Xiao Hua was feeling disappointed, his spiritual sense fell on a very distant corner, and his body trembled slightly, and then he hurriedly flew towards that corner of the herb garden. After flying for a while, Xiao Hua seemed to have thought of something, and with a wave of his hand he released Xiao Gua and Little Silver, and ordered them to help him take away all the spiritual herbs in the herb garden, and then he quickly flew to that corner. When Xiao Hua landed in that corner, he felt a completely different coldness and an indescribable smell of blood. Xiao Hua muttered thoughtfully, "So that's how it is. But, inside this restriction, inside the yellow spring water, what is it?" Xiao Hua's gaze fell on a deep pit that was several zhang in size, and there was a layer of extremely tough restriction above it. The deep pit was filled with the yellow spring water that Xiao Hua had seen outside the Cloud Mountain Maze formation, and in the yellow spring water, there was a thumb-thick, dark green tree. That small tree was several feet in size, like a coral, and had branches several feet in size. The branches were covered with the same dark green leaves, and the leaves were several inches in size, uneven, and covered with veined patterns. Those patterns were very strange, but in Xiao Hua's eyes, they were somewhat familiar, but he couldn't immediately remember where he had seen them. Looking at the top of each branch of the small tree, there was a jade fruit smaller than the belly of a little finger. The jade fruit was also covered with veined patterns, and it was somewhat similar to the leaves, but there was a faint golden connection between these veined patterns. This must be the most precious thing in the entire medicinal garden. Seeing the appearance of the small tree, Xiao Hua immediately thought to himself, But I don't know why Senior Longzi didn't take it away. Of course, when Xiaohua's gaze fell on the yellow spring water, he suddenly understood. It wasn't that Longzi didn't want to take it away, but that he couldn't. This thing could only be planted in the yellow spring water, and the yellow spring water could only be found in this cave. Even if Longzi took it away, he couldn't plant it without the yellow spring water. That's not right. Xiaohua thought to himself. The yellow springs water in the outer layer of the yellow springs array is obviously rootless. I reckon that Senior Longzi must have obtained it from somewhere. Since he was able to move the yellow springs water here, he can naturally move it away. It's not impossible for him to take this small tree with him. Or maybe Senior Longzi just casually planted it back then. Don't you think this thing can survive? Motherfucker, have I gone mad? I don't care whether the Xiaoyu continent and the hidden immortal continent are together or not. I don't care why he left this small tree behind, I just need to put this small tree into my space. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and threw away these indifferent thoughts. He patted his forehead and opened his delirium breaker Dharma eye. Hiss. But when he saw the restriction in front of him and the situation inside the restriction, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. In his delirium breaker Dharma eye, the restriction that was several feet in size was abnormally complex. Strands of brilliance intertwined together, and it was unknown how many times stronger than the restriction in the outer layer of the cave. Moreover, in this rainbow-colored barrier, in the middle of a pool of blood red, the shape of a dark green tree was especially dazzling, like a star. Heavenly pattern land deed. Xiaohua closed his Dharma eye, and immediately thought of the patterns on the leaves and fruits of the small tree. They were actually extremely similar to the heavenly pattern land deed on the mysterious dark cloud. These leaves are somewhat similar to the twilight moon. Xiaohua suddenly realized, could it be that this thing has something to do with soul cultivators? Damn it, Senior Longzi. Who the hell is he? Why are there so many mysterious things in the cave? Chapter 3756. Fellow Taoist Soul Cultivator, where are you? Where is Little White? Since the item was related to soul cultivators, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly summoned Xiaohua and Little White. Soul cultivator Xiaohua was the first to fly out. If fellow Taoist doesn't know about it, then I don't know about it either. Furthermore, this item is blocked by a seal, so I can't sense if it has anything to do with me. It's fine. Xiaohua looked at soul cultivator Xiaohua, who was standing there with soul strands wrapped around his body. Xiaohua was very happy. He knew that soul cultivator Xiaohua had comprehended the green seal text in the mysterious dark clouds. He smiled and replied, "You and I are one. I called you out mainly because of Little White. Fellow Taoist, you summoned me at the right time." Soul cultivator Xiaohua smiled. Little White has been sleeping in the spirit sky for a long time. It has just woken up, but it seems to have something on its mind. Suddenly, a dragon's roar erupted from Xiaohua's forehead, and a meter-long dragon flew out. As soon as it landed, it transformed into Xiaohua, who hovered next to Xiaohua. From the look of it, Xiaohua was even more majestic than the soul cultivator himself. "Ha, Xiaohua, I was just about to look for you," Little White said with a smile. It didn't look like the soul cultivator Xiaohua described it to be. "I remember some things about the past. Oh, and some random things. A few days ago, I was wondering if I should give them to you, but now I've made up my mind. As long as you want them, I'll give them to you." "What are they?" Xiaohua asked with interest. "Why are they making things so difficult for you?" "Of course they're things I know. Although my memories were sealed by others, they were somewhat loose. Now I've found them. I'm not from Yellowflower Ridge, but the 10,000 Demon Realm," Little White said with a smile. 10,000 Demon Realm? Xiaohua exclaimed. "Yes, that's right. If you want them, I can give them to you right now." Little White didn't hide anything. Xiaohua thought for a moment, then nodded. Thank you. Hee, why are you being so polite with me?" Little White laughed mischievously, opened its mouth, and spat out a thumb-sized crystal thread, which fell between Xiaohua's eyebrows. Boom! Xiaohua's mind felt as if it had been struck by a hammer. his vision almost went black, and then countless things fell into his mind. Little White, can't you be a little slower? Xiaohua almost vomited blood. Just as he was about to complain, he suddenly exclaimed, "What? Your Highness is—" However, before he could finish his sentence, another wave-like thing rushed in and interrupted him. Xiaohua hastily closed his eyes, calmly absorbing the memories that Little White sent over. After the time it took to eat a meal, Xiaohua opened his eyes, looked at the complacent Little White, and said with a bitter smile, "There are too many things, too complicated. How the dragon race and the monster race mate. You don't need to let me know, right? I'm letting you know anyway, so there's no need for me to hold anything back." Little White smiled and said, "Besides, it's too troublesome to remove all these things." Alright. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Little White sent over too many things, more than what Huang Yi gave him back then. He didn't know how long it would take to receive them. Now that these things were temporarily placed somewhere, he could only pick up the things he wanted to take a look. "So your Highness is the monster race of the Thousand Monster Realm, called Xianwan, Monster King Emosa's beloved concubine." Xiaohua sighed. "How did you know? Did you peek at your Highness?" "Don't talk nonsense." Mentioning your Highness, Little White's face tightened. "Your Highness seems to be related to the monster that sealed me. That monster's abilities are incomparable. He might be able to hear your words." "All right." Xiaohua nodded. He didn't tell Little White about Dai's situation, so Little White didn't know that your Highness was abnormal. Little White didn't even know that Xiaohua had met your Highness. "All right, I've given you everything. I'm also relaxed." Little White smiled and said, "I'd better go back and rest. I'll just wait for you to cast my body." "Don't worry." Xiaohua waved his hand and said, "I called you out because I want you to help me see what this is." Saying that, Xiaohua used his finger to point at the small tree behind Little White. "What is it?" Little White was also puzzled. Because it came out of the mysterious cloud, it didn't sense anything abnormal, but when it saw the small tree inside the seal, its body couldn't help but tremble, even its human form collapsed, and it turned into its dragon form and pounced towards the seal. Rumble. Thunderbolts appeared one after another, forcing Little White to shrink back. That dragon form circled around the seal, as if it was abnormally excited. Seeing Little White like this, Xiaohua was also shocked. He had never seen Little White like this before. "What is this?" Xiaohua hurriedly asked. "Is it very precious?" "What is it?" "Damn it. Xiaohua, how can your luck be so good?" Little White's voice was abnormally excited. "How many fruits are there first?" "It seems—" Separated by the seal, Xiaohua's divine sense couldn't probe, so he frowned and said, 365. "What about the leaves?" "There are 9 leaves on each branch, and at the top of each branch is a fruit. What do you think?" Xiaohua's heart moved and he said, "Unfortunately." Little White suddenly sighed again, not answering the question. "What's wrong? What is this thing?" Xiaohua's curiosity was greatly aroused. Little White withdrew its dragon form and turned back into Xiaohua's form, pointing its finger and said, "This thing is called the underworld fruit." "Oh, don't ask me why I know. I don't know why I know." Underworld fruit. Xiaohua originally thought that this rare thing would have an extremely shocking name, but he didn't expect the name to be so ordinary, and couldn't help but frown. Seeing Xiaohua frown like this, how could Little White not know what Xiaohua was thinking? It said disdainfully, "Don't look down on this thing just because the name of this underworld fruit is unusual. Can something named after a world be simple? This underworld fruit is very rare?" Xiaohua still didn't understand. What's the use of this thing? The underworld fruit is naturally not rare in the underworld. It is said that it is everywhere. Little White said with a smile, "But outside the underworld, of course it is rare." Xiaohua was disappointed, shaking his head and said, "Since it is so, what is there to be surprised about? The underworld fruit is everywhere. We have no use for it." "If you think so, you are wrong," Little White explained. "Although this thing is everywhere in the underworld fruit, for this underworld fruit to grow for 10 million years, that is also rare." "How do you know this thing has grown for 10 million years?" Xiaohua looked pensive. The underworld fruit is originally a stem, and it forms after 1,000,000 years. According to the quality, the number of branches is different, or a few, or 100, or 1,000, and the size of the underworld fruit is also different. No matter the size of the tree and the number of branches, after 1,000,000 years, a fruit will grow at the top of each branch, and then every 1,000,000 years, a leaf will grow on each branch, and when each branch grows 10 leaves, the underworld fruit is considered ripe. See, so it is like that? Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air, finally understanding the preciousness of this little tree. Also, once the underworld fruit is planted, it cannot be moved. If it is moved, all the branches, leaves and fruits will fall, and the entire underworld fruit will turn into a stem. Damn it, I was wondering. Xiao Hua cursed. No wonder Senior Tsong Longzi left it here. Tsong Longzi? Little White was slightly stunned, looking left and right. Who is this person? Oh, let's talk about this later. Xiao Hua looked at the underworld fruit regretfully and said, let's talk about this underworld fruit first. In other words, although this thing has grown for 10,000,000 years, it is still not ripe? It is definitely not ripe. Little White shrugged, exactly the same as Xiao Hua. What a pity. Xiao Hua was helpless. I saw that the underworld fruit's fruit and leaves had a heaven pattern earth deed, and thought that it would be useful for you and soul cultivators. Looks like we still have to wait 1,000,000 years. I just don't know what a ripe underworld fruit can do. Who said it can't be used? Little White asked curiously. You said it? Xiao Hua was stunned. Didn't you say it was a pity just now? Damn it, I said it was a pity because the underworld fruit is not ripe. Little White laughed. The underworld fruit needs 12,000,000 years to mature. Even in the underworld, it is extremely rare. Especially this kind of underworld fruit that contains the number of stars in the sky, it is extremely good quality. Who knows what effect this underworld fruit will have when it matures? In the future, don't hesitate when you speak, say it all in one breath. Xiao Hua laughed. Little White ignored him, looking at the soul cultivator Xiao Hua at the side and said, as for the unripe underworld fruit, its fruit and leaves are extremely useful for the soul. As for what use it is, don't ask me, I also don't know. Of course, just by looking at the heaven pattern earth deed on the leaves, it is 100 times stronger than the daybreak moon you used before, not to mention that the leaves have grown for 1,000,000 years, and the fruit has grown for 10,000,000 years. How do I pick the leaves, fruits, and roots? Xiao Hua suddenly asked. Just wrap them with soul strands. Little White hurriedly said, don't use your hands, and also don't use anything else. The underworld fruit is an item of the underworld. It cannot be contaminated with anything with life. Since it is an item of the underworld, how can it be useful for the soul? Xiao Hua was a bit confused. The soul is the most mysterious thing in the world. Little White laughed. Now that I am a soul body, I am the most sensitive to this. At the same time, the soul is also the thing that connects the underworld to the other realms. Of course, the underworld fruit is useful for the soul. As for what use it is, I also don't know. Do you need it? Xiao Hua asked. Little White shook his head. I have already merged with the fire dragon's soul. My soul is quite solid. I only need a dragon body to be reborn. I don't need this item. Moreover, this underworld fruit has 365 fruits. Each fruit has 9 leaves. It contains heavenly principles. The soul cultivator Xiao Hua needs to use it. There are endless mysteries. He cannot lack one. If you break the seal and take the underworld fruit, immediately send it into the mysterious dark cloud. I just need to smell it a bit. Chapter 3757. Alas, although this thing is good, how do I collect it? Xiao Hua frowned and looked at the restriction with a troubled expression. That's not something I need to worry about. Xiao Bai laughed. Now that I've recovered some of my memories, it's already good that I can tell you this. If it was before, I wouldn't even know about this. You can think about how to break the restriction yourself. I'll go back with Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua first. Fellow Soul Cultivator, don't worry. I'll send Xiao Bai back first. Xiao Hua waved his hand. I'll have to borrow your strength later. No problem. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua didn't say anything, but he knew that if he got the underworld fruit, he would be the most direct beneficiary, so he replied with a smile. Xiaohua used his soul thread to send Xiaobai back. Now that his soul thread was strong and tenacious, sending Xiaobai back was as easy as turning over his hand. Pinching his chin, Xiaohua looked at the restriction above the yellow springs and frowned. He didn't have much magic power left in his body. Even if he used up all of it, he would only be able to use half of the spiritual fire. But looking at the restriction situation, relying on the spiritual fire alone wouldn't be of any help. He could only attack from different angles. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua opened his delusion breaker eyes and looked at the entire restriction carefully. Finally, he closed his eyes. The light above the restriction seemed to be engraved in his mind. This restriction is very strange. It looks like a single restriction, but it's actually made up of hundreds of small restrictions. These small restrictions complement each other. If you only attack one restriction, the other restrictions will work together to defend. Attacking one restriction is not much different from attacking the entire restriction. But if you attack the entire restriction, the power of the attack will be scattered. Senior Zonglongzi, your restriction is really marvelous. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. You don't want others to break this restriction. Could it be that you want to keep this underworld fruit for yourself? It seems like that's the only way. After the time it took to eat a meal, Xiaohua opened his eyes and smiled confidently. However, it seems like I'll have to borrow Fujiwen's Heaven's Punishment Prison crystal again. Hehe, isn't this the legendary borrowing power to fight strength? Fujiwen, this Xiao's disciple, is really useful. Fujiwen. Smiling, Xiaohua raised his head to send a telepathic message to Fujiwen. However, after shouting twice, Xiaohua came back to his senses. There was a restriction in Zonglongzi's cave, so his voice transmission might not be heard by Fujiwen. Hehe, let's make preparations first. Xiaohua clapped his hands and hundreds of jade talismans flew into the air. However, just as he was about to make his move, he hesitated. Although this constellation star formation is the most complete innate divine restriction that I have comprehended, it is the best defensive formation. However, when it comes to breaking formations, it's just passable. Green-robed fellow Taoist. Xiaohua pondered as he summoned green-robed Xiaohua. He asked, what do you think? In terms of defense, if our constellation star formation claims to be second, no other formation would dare to claim to be first. The green-robed Xiaohua controlled his formless nascent soul to appear. He shook his head and explained, but if it's used for breaking restrictions and attacking, it's far inferior to the Pleiades Devil-Devouring Immortal Formation and the Golden Crow Immortal Slaying Demon Formation. But we haven't comprehended enough of the other divine restrictions. Xiaohua said regretfully, they say that when it's time to use a book, one will regret not having enough. Only now do I understand that opportunities are only given to those who are prepared. You and I still haven't accumulated enough. Yes, what we lack now is time. Fellow Taoist, it's time to go into seclusion. Only seclusion is the key to our progress. Green-robed Xiaohua said with deep emotion. Of course I can go into seclusion. However, I's primordial spirit is very strong. With fellow Taoists comprehending their own techniques, what's the difference between this and I going into seclusion? Xiaohua said with a smile, of course, after these trivial matters are over, I still have to properly organize what I've gained and comprehended. At this point, Xiaohua smiled, green-robed fellow Taoist, since you've already comprehended the Pleiades Devil-Devouring Immortal Formation and the Golden Crow Immortal Slaying Demon Formation, why don't you use them now? Alright. Green-robed Xiaohua nodded. After the last encounter in the Eye of the Sea, this poor Taoist's Golden Crow Immortal Slaying Demon Formation has comprehended more than 200 talismans, so this poor Taoist can barely arrange a powerful formation. Leave this to I. Good. Xiaohua nodded, then took out the Kunlun mirror and instructed, fellow Taoist, set up the formation first. I will also make some preparations. When everything is ready, I will go and call Fujiwen. Fellow Taoist, please control this Kunlun mirror well. We will work together to break this restriction. I'll listen to fellow Taoist's instructions. Green-robed Xiaohua opened his mouth and swallowed the Kunlun mirror. With a wave of his hand, hundreds of flashing red jade talismans fell into the air. As green-robed Xiao Hua formed hand seals, clusters of flames appeared and disappeared into the void. After half an hour, green-robed Xiao Hua finished setting up the Golden Crow Immortal Slaying Demon formation. Xiao Hua also thought of the details of breaking the formation. Then, Xiao Hua nodded towards green-robed Xiao Hua and walked out of the medicinal garden. Xiao Hua passed through the alchemy room and arrived at Song Lang Zi's inner mansion. When he saw the situation in front of him, the joy on his face disappeared and was replaced by a layer of frost. Because on the side of the bed, there was a scholarly cultivator in bright yellow clothes carefully examining the Qingquan bag in his hand. At the feet of this scholarly cultivator, Fu Jiwen was curled up on the ground with a painful expression on his face. Obviously, the scholarly cultivator was interrogating him. "Who is it?" When Xiao Hua walked out of the pill room, the scholarly cultivator immediately noticed. He raised his head and looked at Xiao Hua with a gaze like lightning. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and stared at the scholarly cultivator coldly. "Who are you?" "Ah." The scholarly cultivator was not afraid of Xiao Hua. He looked at the Qingquan bag in his hand and put it away. He kicked Fu Jiwen and laughed. "I am naturally me. You should be the cultivator who came in with the little scholar. Oh, why do you look like a Taoist? Your luck is pretty good. You can actually touch Song Langzi's inner palace. Quickly take out your Qingquan bag and I will spare your lives." "For you." Xiao Hua did not answer and only coldly looked at the scholarly cultivator. The scholarly cultivator was stunned. He looked at his feet in disbelief and then looked at Xiao Hua. He blinked his eyes and said in surprise, "I didn't tell you my name because I didn't want to take your lives. Could it be that there are people in this world who don't want to take their lives?" "For you." Xiao Hua released his soul sense but could not determine the cultivation level of this scholarly cultivator. Therefore, he did not dare to act blindly without thinking. He only wanted to provoke this scholarly cultivator and make him attack. Only then could he protect Fu Jiwen from harm. But at this time, although Fu Jiwen's expression was extremely distorted and he was enduring a strange kind of pain, his eyes blinked from time to time as if he wanted to say something to Xiao Hua. "My name is Huang Shou," the scholarly cultivator said with a fiendish smile. "Since you know my name, don't think of leaving this cave alive." "Your Excellency, don't you want to know who I am?" Xiao Hua smiled and took 2 steps forward. The scholarly cultivator named Huang Shou shrugged. He waved his hand and took out a folding fan. This folding fan was only 1 foot long and was golden in color. When Huang Shou opened the folding fan, a picture of birds chirping in an empty valley was revealed. At this time, Huang Shou had a lazy expression on his face. He kicked Fu Jiwen to the side and said with a smile, "2 people who are about to die, so what if I know your name?" "My name is Xiao Hua." Seeing this, Xiao Hua's heart settled. He took 2 steps forward and said with a smile, "Fellow immortal Huang, when you reach the underworld, don't forget. Oh, right, I also have a Dharma name. Taoist Xiao." Saying this, Xiao Hua waved his hand. The soaring dragon shears flashed with a golden light and slashed towards Huang Shou's neck. Xiao Hua hated this Huang Shou very much. "Ah, nascent soul." When Huang Shou saw the golden light and heard Xiao Hua say his Dharma name, his expression immediately changed. He waved the folding fan in his right hand and instead of advancing, he retreated and threw himself at Fu Jiwen. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a cold light. He flew up and grabbed with his right hand. A powerful imprisoning force fell towards Huang Shou. Seeing Xiao Hua fly a few feet away, Huang Shou's originally shocked face suddenly revealed a smile. His flying figure also suddenly stopped. Yellow clouds appeared around his body. On the folding fan in his right hand, the straight mountain peak actually flew out from the folding fan. Tens of thousands of armor inscriptions surged and blocked in front of the soaring dragon shears. At the same time, Huang Shou flicked his left hand. A fist-sized imperial equipment rushed into the air. In an instant, there were tens of thousands of multicolored lights. Clang! A crisp sound rang out. The soaring dragon shears streaked across the mountain peak like lightning and split it in half. The folding fan in Huang Shou's hand also broke at the same time. A trace of surprise suddenly appeared on Huang Shou's smiling face. His entire body quickly retreated and dodged the soaring dragon shears. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Xiao Hua's body stagnated. His soul consciousness suddenly swept back. His face was also filled with astonishment. Who? But the place where Xiao Hua's soul consciousness swept through, that is, the space on both sides of the cave entrance of the alchemy room, distorted inch by inch. Waves of righteous qi and inscriptions flowed out. Two Huang Shou wearing bright yellow clothes appeared. Moreover, these two people also held fist-sized imperial equipment in their hands. The multicolored lights of these imperial equipment were exactly the same as Huang Shou's imperial equipment. At this moment, although Xiao Hua didn't know whether these two people were Huang Shou's primordial spirit or something else, how could he not understand that he had already fallen into Huang Shou's trap? At the same time that he schemed for Huang Shou to leave Fujiwen, Huang Shou also schemed for him to step out of the alchemy room. Xiao Hua, hand over your life. As soon as the two Huang Shou behind Xiao Hua appeared, they shouted in unison. At the same time, they urged the imperial equipment in their hands. Strings of inscriptions flowed like lightning in the multicolored light. In the blink of an eye, they merged together. The multicolored light shrouded an area of several dozen feet to the left of Xiao Hua. The inscriptions on the imperial equipment drove thousands of righteous qi ribbons and wrapped around Xiao Hua in an extremely mysterious trajectory. Chapter 3758. Roar. Sensing the terrifying imprisoning power within these inscriptions, Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. These inscriptions were clearly designed to deal with Dao sect cultivators. The true essence within his meridians was imprisoned, and he couldn't activate it at all. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly displayed his transcendence golden body, and his figure rapidly expanded, wanting to break through the binding of these inscriptions. Rumble. Xiao Hua's transcendence golden body had just appeared when the three imperial treasures let out a rumbling sound. The entire space enveloped by multicolored light trembled. Following the trembling, the multicolored light suddenly converged, and the imperial treasures fell at a speed invisible to the naked eye. Xiao Hua was caught off guard. Although his transcendence golden body flashed with a dark golden brilliance, wanting to dodge the imperial treasures still fell on Xiao Hua's transcendence golden body in the end. The three imperial treasures turned into a complete one at this time, forcefully locking Xiao Hua's neck like a shackle. As this shackle fell, immediately thousands of inscriptions mixed with a vast aura were born from the void. It was like a heavenly punishment prison crystal inscription chain, locking Xiao Hua's entire body. Oh! The transcendence golden body let out a rare groan, like the snoring of a sleeping demon god. Xiao Hua seemed to be angry, and his transcendence golden body madly expanded. However, Zilala. The chains made a jerky sound, and the vast aura within the inscriptions tightly bound Xiao Hua's transcendence golden body. With Xiao Hua's strength, he actually couldn't break free. On the contrary, because it expanded, the inscription chains spun even more crazily, suppressing Xiao Hua's heavenly infusion technique and heavenly law's embodiment technique. Under this powerful force, the huge transcendence golden body shrank in circles. Xiao Hua was truly extremely shocked. The strength of the three Huang Shous was only at the upper fourth level of essence energy, which was also the realm of Great Confucian. They had yet to reach the level of Great Grandmaster who could refine the spirit back to the void. However, this imperial equipment was truly strange. It seemed to have been specially refined to restrain Taoist cultivators. Even Xiao Hua, who could kill Taoist cultivators at the fifth level of essence energy, was firmly locked in place. As expected of someone on the yellow board, under the joint attack of us three brothers, you still have the strength to struggle. Huang Shou saw Xiao Hua fall into the trap and laughed towards the sky. Big brother. The Confucian cultivator behind Xiao Hua landed on the left, with a pleasant surprise on his face. Yellow token to suppress this bastard. This fellow's strength was simply too terrifying. I've never seen a Taoist cultivator who could still struggle after being locked down by the yellow earth lock. Don't worry, third brother. The other Huang Shou chuckled and said, Big brother took the little scholar cultivator's Jiankuan bag. There were many rare treasures in it. It seems that he obtained them from Tsang Longzi's inner palace. This Xiaohua's Qinkuan bag naturally has many more things. Let's take the Qinkuan bag first. Okay, I'll go now. The so-called third brother agreed and was about to descend. At this time, Xiaohua was already standing on the ground. Using both arms to support himself, the yellow earth lock once again let out a chila sound. However, that was all it took to scare the three Huang Shou so much that their expressions changed. The third brother even took half a step back. The Xianhuang token? Could it be related to the mysterious yellow list? Xiaohua didn't withdraw his transcendence golden body. After hearing this, his face turned cold and he asked coldly, "What Xianhuang list?" "I don't know." Huang Shou simply didn't answer Xiaohua's question. He scolded, "Third brother, quickly take his Qinkuan bag. Don't talk nonsense with him." With that, Huang Shou took out a 3-inch seal from his bosom. The top of the seal was 1 inch long and the bottom was 2 inches long yellow. A golden light flashed from the bottom of the seal. This was the Xianhuang token Huang Shou was talking about. "Yes, big brother." The triplet brother, who looked exactly like Huang Shou, agreed and walked to the front of Xiaohua's golden body. However, before he could raise his hand, the Tingjiao scissors, which had just fallen to the ground, suddenly flew up and slashed his neck faster than lightning. Although countless inscriptions surged out from the bright yellow clothes to resist, these inscriptions were instantly cut in half along with his neck. How is this possible? The triplet brother opened his mouth, and a shadow of his primordial spirit flew out from his neck. He shouted, "How can a cultivator locked by the yellow ground lock still have spiritual power?" Swish! The golden light of the Tingjiao shears was truly overbearing. The primordial spirit only swayed, but the tail of the Tingjiao shears swung, and the primordial spirit was also cut into 2 halves. It was even neater than a piece of white paper cut with scissors. Boom! As the Tingjiao shears showed off its power, a colorful beam of light suddenly appeared from the left side of the elixir room of the cave residence and hit the other triplet brother of Huang Shou with lightning speed. The Confucian cultivator screamed, and the inscriptions and noble spirits surging around him were swallowed up by the beam of light. Even the shadow of his primordial spirit was killed by the beam of light before it could escape. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Before Huang Shou's Xianhuang token could be used, his 2 triplet brothers were killed. Huang Shou couldn't help but look at the source of the beam of light in horror. Unfortunately, the clear eye technique and the divine sense technique were useless. He couldn't see anything at all. However, even if he didn't know that it was Xiaohua's invisible nascent soul, he also knew that the person who came must be related to Xiaohua. He decisively opened his mouth, and a stream of true qi gushed out and fell on the Xianhuang token. Boom! The Xianhuang token suddenly expanded, and emitted a brilliance like the sun. Rumble! Under this sun, 2 fist-sized green seal characters rushed out from between Xiaohua's eyebrows, and then the heaven and earth chanted. Layers of faint green lightning appeared above Huang Shou's head, and hit him head-on. Swoosh swoosh swoosh! Like falling snow melting into water, in the sun-like brilliance of the mysterious yellow token, clusters of inscriptions turned invisible, and streams of awe-inspiring qi were struck into nothingness. Huang Shou was like a bald chicken with plucked feathers, trembling as he stood in front of Xiaohua. Xiaohua! Huang Shou couldn't help but beg for mercy, but just as he cried out, the murderous golden light appeared again with a whoosh, and Huang Shou's body was split in half from top to bottom. The nascent soul that had already refined qi and returned to spirit was immediately killed by the lightning as soon as it appeared. Fellow Taoist, you were a bit careless. Green-robed Xiaohua put away the Kunlun mirror and looked at Xiaohua, who had already put away his Dharma body and was looking down at the so-called yellow earth lock. Alas! Xiaohua sighed and shook his head slightly. Yes. This Xiao only thought that only I had the luck to enter Senior Zonglang's cave, but I didn't expect that others would also occasionally step on dog shit. However, if these 3 Confucian cultivators who are only at the 4th level of origin energy want to sneak attack this Xiao, they are still too weak. Green-robed Xiao Hua knew that although his appearance had changed the situation of the battle and killed the 3 Confucian cultivators, he also knew that even without him, Xiao Hua's soul technique would have been able to succeed, so he simply smiled and asked, "Do you still need this poor Taoist's help?" "No need. Fellow Taoist, go set up the formation to break the restriction. These 3 Confucian cultivators should be following behind us. Since they are here and Zhai Xingzi and the others haven't yet, Zhai Xingzi and the others won't come." Xiao Hua shook his head. "Wait until I see the memories of these 3 people, then I will know the cause of this matter." "Okay." Green-robed Xiao Hua agreed and didn't say anything else. Xiao Hua's soul thread reached out from between his eyebrows and landed between Huang Shou's eyebrows. After a moment, he looked at Huang Shou's 2 triplets and unconsciously frowned. Strange. These 3 people's memories, why do they have traces of being erased? Apart from knowing that these 3 people are called Huang Shou, Huang Zhen, and Huang Ji, this Xiao can't see their origins at all. However, I heard Huang Shou mention the mysterious yellow proclamation just now. Moreover, the imperial tool is called the Yellow Earth Lock and the imperial tool similar to the seal is called the mysterious yellow token. These 3 people must be related to the mysterious yellow proclamation. Just as he thought of this, the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, think about it more. Star Lord Palace's Gusu Churan is called Gusu Chiodi. Huang Shou, Huang Zhen, and Huang Ji have the surname Huang, and the given name Shou Zhenji. Isn't this the surname Tian Di Xian Huang in the 1,000-character classic? Isn't this the surname Tian Di Xian Huang in the 1,000-character classic?" "Yes, fellow Taoist, you're right. I understand." Xiao Hua sighed. Previously, this Xiao thought that the mysterious yellow proclamation was just a bounty list. I didn't expect that there would be a mysterious yellow token after the mysterious yellow proclamation. It seems that this Xiao has caused trouble. "Fellow Taoist, you don't cause trouble, but trouble always provokes you." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua said again, "We Confucian cultivators emphasize cooperation and cooperation. Fellow Taoist, you have to think about it more. If you want to run amok on the hidden immortal continent by yourself, I'm afraid it will be difficult." "Yes, I understand. You can open this yellow earth lock," Xiao Hua said with a frown. Puff! Above Xiao Hua's head, a 3-colored cloud spurted out and turned into 3 big hands that fell on the yellow earth lock that imprisoned Xiao Hua. The 3 big hands turned into inscriptions that fell on the yellow earth lock according to the memories of Huang Shou and the other triplets. These inscriptions flickered and changed from time to time. After a while, there was a crisp kacha sound, and the yellow earth lock split into 3 and fell in the air. Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the yellow earth lock and the mysterious yellow token both fell into his hand. He carefully looked at them and said in a low voice, "Since there is a yellow earth lock, there should also be a mysterious heaven lock. The yellow earth lock is used to lock Tao cultivators on the yellow proclamation, and the mysterious heaven lock has always been used to lock Tao cultivators on the mysterious proclamation. It seems that there are many immortal palaces on the hidden immortal continent. There is not only one Star Lord Hall." After speaking, Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and the yellow earth lock and the mysterious yellow token both fell into the hands of Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua also opened his mouth and spat out 4-colored true qi to take the 2 imperial treasures into his body. After Xiao Hua removed the restriction on Fu Jiwen's body, Fu Jiwen stood up and said very embarrassedly, "Disciple was careless." "Thank you, Master." Xiao Hua nodded and asked, "What's the matter with these 3 people?" Chapter 3759. "Okay, Father understands." Fu Jiwen hurriedly said, "Senior Longlangzi's orthodoxy and the Tao of Array are in the cave that Disciple went to." Disciple put everything in the Qiankuan bag. When Disciple saw that there was nothing left behind and came out, I saw the 3 cultivators enter the inner cave. The cultivator called Huang Shou captured Disciple without saying anything and wanted to interrogate me about Master's whereabouts. However, Disciple did not give in, so the 2 cultivators ambushed me in the air while Huang Shou waited here for Master to come out. "What else did the 3 of them talk about?" Xiao Hua asked. Can you tell the origin of these three people? I can't. Fu Jiwen shook his head without hesitation. Other than interrogating disciple, these three people were communicating with each other, as if they were hiding something. If not for master's interrogations, disciple wouldn't even know that this cultivator was called Huang Shou. And Xiaohua nodded. With a wave of his hand, he burned the three corpses with true samadhi fire and took away all the qiankuan bags. However, after thinking for a moment, Xiaohua took out another qiankuan bag and handed it to Fu Jiwen. This should be Senior Tsang Langzi's array. You can keep it. This is your own fate. Master, disciple's Tao of array still needs master to teach me. Isn't disciple's opportunity given by master? Fu Jiwen hurriedly said with a smile. Besides, isn't disciple's thing also master's? Master should first comprehend it and then pass it on to disciple. And that's fine too. Xiaohua was not polite and took everything and said, it's not safe to leave it with you. If master keeps it, no one will be able to find it. Fu Jiwen looked at the pill room again and said with a smile, seems like master is also returning from a rewarding journey. Not at all. Xiaohua said with a bitter smile. In the pill room, there is nothing but a few jade bottles. Instead, there are some good things in the herb garden. Let's go. Master still needs to borrow your heaven punishment prison crystal to break the seal. Yes, master. Fu Jiwen nodded and said with a smile, but, master, when will you help disciple with this heaven punishment prison crystal? Isn't this an opportunity? Let's go. Xiaohua patted Fu Jiwen's head and said with a smile. Yes, master. Fu Jiwen was overjoyed. When Xiaohua brought Fu Jiwen into the pill room, he still looked at the entrance of the cave and stared at it for a moment. Since Huang Shou and the other two were able to enter this place, then Xiaohua and Fu Jiwen were definitely not the only lucky ones. His previous thoughts were too arbitrary. Perhaps Duanmu Liangxing, Zhai Xingzi and the others would also come here. Zhai Xingzi and the others were still fine, but if Duanmu Liangxing were to come, things would be very bad. Therefore, when Xiaohua sent Fu Jiwen to check the restrictions on the underworld fruit, he also carefully set up the capital star formation in front of the entrance of the medicinal garden. Fortunately, although Tsang Langzi had already set up a formation in the space of the medicinal garden, Xiaohua's jade talisman was also set up without expending much magic power. It's better to be safe than sorry. Xiaohua finished setting up the formation, and only then did he relax. He thought to himself, I'll remember these words. In the future, he couldn't let his guard down. Anything that could happen would happen. Moreover, it can happen at any time when you are not paying attention. Also, if the origins of Huang Shou and the other two are related to the profound yellow order, then I'll have to be even more careful in the future. The strength I've displayed now is at the upper fourth level of essence energy. Whether it's the Duanmu family or the profound yellow order, the cultivators they sent out are all around the lower fifth level of essence energy. Although Huang Shou and the other two were at the upper fourth level of essence energy, the three of them, together with the yellow earthlock, were able to firmly suppress the late-stage nascent soul cultivators of the Tao sect. Now that I've killed the three of them, I'm afraid that the cultivators who come in the future will all be at the upper fifth level of essence energy. Our days are getting worse and worse. Chirp chirp. Xiaohua's mind was full of worries. Just as he returned to the medicinal garden, Little Silver and Xiaogua immediately flew over. Xiaogua's face was red and cute. With a wave of her hand, a large amount of spirit herbs and spirit fruits landed in Xiaohua's hands. Not bad, not bad. Xiaohua put away the things and patted Xiaogua's head. He smiled and praised, You two are really capable. Hurry up and go. Keep up the good work and bring everything back home. Chirp chirp. Little Silver chirped cheerfully and swiftly rushed to a medicinal field protected by a restriction. He bit down with his sharp teeth, and it wasn't long before the restriction was broken. Then, Xiaogua landed in the medicinal field. With a wave of her hands, a dark green halo fell on the spirit herbs, and the intact spirit herbs slowly flew out of the ground. Seeing that the two little ones were busy beyond words, Xiaohua flew over to the yellow springs. At that moment, Fu Jiwen had already been looking at it for a long time. When he saw Xiaohua come over, he hurriedly said in a low voice, Shifu, This restriction should be called a boundary. It's extremely powerful. I'm afraid this disciple can't help Shifu. Isn't it good that the boundary is powerful? Xiaohua smiled. How much longer do you need to use the heavenly punishment prison crystal? For more hours. Fu Jiwen thought for a moment, then said, but Shifu, in my opinion, even if we use the heavenly punishment prison crystal, I'm afraid we won't be able to break this boundary. After all, the boundary is too big, and it's different from the restriction on the jade case from before. It doesn't seem to be actively attacking. Shifu already knew this, Xiaohua said indifferently. Go take a look elsewhere first. Not only are there a lot of spirit herbs in this medicinal field, the spirit gathering arrays on each field are different as well, which will be extremely useful for you to comprehend arrays. Also, memorize them well and tell Shifu about them in detail later. Yes, Shifu. Fu Jiwen's eyes lit up, and he agreed to fly elsewhere. On the path of formations, Fu Jiwen and Xiaohua were in a different situation. Fu Jiwen had seen plenty of formation diagrams, spirit formations, and essence formations, but he had never received any real guidance. He had only seen a few real formations. Xiaohua, on the other hand, had a very high starting point. He had started with innate divine restrictions, such as the capital stars array, but he was very lacking in the flexible use of ordinary magic arrays. What the two of them lacked was something Cang Longzi could teach them. Just as Xiaohua said, there was a huge spirit gathering array on this medicinal field, and each field had a different spirit gathering array according to the different spirit herbs and their habits. The spirit gathering arrays were similar in nature, but the details were very different. This was the use of arrays. When Xiaohua entered the Misty Mountain Bewildering Array, he was also very emotional. He could see through the nature of these bewildering arrays at a glance, but he didn't know how to set them up. There were many spirit gathering arrays in the entire medicinal field. Not only were they useful to Fu Jiwen, but even Xiaohua himself would benefit a lot from comprehending them. After sending Fu Jiwen away, Xiaohua flew around the restriction for a long time. He discussed with the green-robed Xiaohua several times, and finally finalized all the details. Seeing that it was almost time, Xiaohua stood in the air. Fu Jiwen had already flown over and took out the heavenly punishment prison crystal, waiting for Xiaohua's order. Shifu. Seeing Xiaohua standing there with his eyes closed, Fu Jiwen reminded, it's almost time. Okay, put the heavenly punishment prison crystal on the restriction. Xiaohua opened his eyes and said calmly as the magic power in his body accumulated. Yes, master. Fu Jiwen looked at some of the heaven's punishment prison crystals that were already surging with rosy clouds. He gently loosened his hand and the heaven's punishment prison crystals fell towards the barrier below him. Before the heaven's punishment prison crystals touched the barrier, layers of heaven's punishment thunder had already formed. Crackle. Thunderbolts were born from the void and fell inside the heavenly punishment prison crystal. At the same time, the thunderbolts also affected the barrier. Unfortunately, to Xiaohua and Fu Jiwen's disappointment, when the thunderbolts fell on the barrier slightly fluctuated with magic power. This fluctuation was like a surging whirlpool, scattering the power of the thunderbolts around the barrier. It didn't produce any counterattack power. Therefore, the heavenly punishment thunder didn't have any intention of attacking the barrier and only wreaked havoc around the heavenly punishment prison crystal. Shifu. Seeing that the heavenly punishment prison crystal didn't work, Fu Jiwen was somewhat embarrassed and said in a low voice. However, Xiaohua seemed to be standing there normally, but all his attention was focused on the point where the heavenly punishment prison crystal's thunderbolts came into contact with the barrier. He was carefully observing the movement of the barrier's magic power and the extension of the force. After the heavenly punishment prison crystal's thunderbolts passed, Xiaohua opened his mouth and said faintly, "Disciple, you're right. This barrier adheres to defense and doesn't attack. It's completely different from the previous restriction. As the saying goes, one can be strong without desires. This barrier is a rare, authentic defensive formation. It doesn't attack at all and only focuses on defense. It's like a defensive cultivator. Because of this, I'm afraid that this barrier can't be completely broken without the strength to pass the tribulation." Fu Jiwen put away the heavenly punishment prison crystal and said with a bitter smile, "If that's the case, it seems that only the immortal emperors of the immortal palaces and the patriarchs of the aristocratic families have this cultivation level. Shifu probably can't break the restriction now." Hee. Shifu said that to completely break this barrier, one must have the strength to pass the tribulation. Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. But why must Shifu completely break this barrier? If Shifu wants the things inside, Shifu only needs to open a small gap. Disciple understands. Fu Jiwen finally understood why Xiao Hua kept staring at the barrier just now. How can Shifu help? I'm afraid that with your cultivation level, you won't be able to. Xiao Hua thought for a moment. Shifu is afraid of hurting you if you stay here. You'd better collect everything in this medicinal garden with Xiaogua and Little Silver. Yes, Shifu. Hearing this, Fu Jiwen very tactfully flew over. Afterwards, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and clapped his hands. Buzz. 3 colored true qi gushed out and 9 flying swords flew out from the true qi, letting out ear-piercing sword cries. Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's voice came from the flying swords. Fellow immortal, this little one receives the flying swords and gives fellow immortal a helping hand. I'll have to trouble fellow immortal. Xiaohua cupped his hands. This barrier, I'm afraid it won't be easy for me to break through it with my Taoist methods. I'll have to rely on fellow immortal's Confucian cultivator voice. Good. The sword qi of the 9 flying swords surged and formed a human figure similar to Xiaohua's size. This little one has already prepared according to fellow immortal Green Robe's words. Chapter 3760. Fellow soul cultivator, are you ready? Xiaohua nodded his head and asked again. A dark green brilliance gushed out from between Xiaohua's eyebrows and condensed into the shape of lightning. Xiaohua's voice sounded, I am also ready. All right, fellow Taoist soul cultivator. You've seen for yourself how powerful this barrier is. Given our current strength, there's no way we'll be able to break through it. Even if we use all of the methods we discussed earlier, we'll only be able to tear open a crack in the barrier in the span of a few breaths. Whether or not we'll be able to obtain the underworld fruit will all depend on you. Fellow Taoist, don't worry. This underworld fruit is related to Ai's growth. I care about it more than any of you. Xiaohua laughed, his voice faintly coming from the layers of lightning. Do it. Xiaohua ordered. Xiaohua waved his hands, and several sword lights shot into the air. Rumble. A thunderous sound was heard, and 5-colored lightning fell from the sky. It was the Confucian cultivator's 5 qi thunder. The lightning fell and hit the barrier. The barrier was suffused with the color of lightning, like brilliant fireworks, dazzling the entire barrier. 9 heavens divine thunder. Fall. At the same time, the green-robed Xiaohua's voice came from the side of the scholarly cultivator. His shapeless nascent soul rubbed its hands, and the 9 heavens divine thunder was even more vast than the 5 qi thunder. Like a horned dragon, it fell from the sky and rushed toward the barrier. Kacha! A wave-like fluctuation was set off on the barrier. Protrusions appeared on the barrier along with the lightning snakes, blocking the lightning from all directions. Since fellow Taoists have names, I should also have a name for my lightning and thunder technique. Xiaohua's voice was strange, as if it didn't belong in this world. In my name I call for thunder, 3 corpses in thunder. Following the appearance of 3 dark green seal characters in the air, 3 extremely simple and indescribable voices came out from the green seal characters. Kacha. Hundreds of dark green lightning threads appeared out of thin air. It was fine if the lightning did not appear, but once it did, Kachacha? Whether it was the 5 qi righteous thunder or the 9 heavens divine thunder, they all made thunderous sounds. The thunderbolts that were originally pouncing towards the barrier all flew towards the 3 corpses in lightning. Although Xiaohua's 3 primordial spirits all had the ability to control lightning, he had never used all 3 lightning. Today, in order to break the barrier in a short period of time, he used it, but he didn't expect that there would be such a reaction. Xiaohua was shocked and hurriedly waited with rapt attention. If there were any changes, he would immediately isolate himself. Rumble! The green light of the three corpses in thunder shone brightly and intertwined with the 5 chi righteous thunder and the 9 heavens godly thunder. In the blink of an eye, the green light converged and formed a thunder that was condensed from lightning threads. Then, the 5 chi righteous thunder turned into 5-colored lightning that circled around the green seal script lightning threads. In the end, the 9 heavens godly thunder turned into hundreds of thunderbolts that roamed around the 5 chi righteous thunder like flames. Good. Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He knew that the 3 types of lightning naturally merged together. As Xiaohua rejoiced in his heart, the ball of lightning that turned into the size of a wicker basket fell on top of the barrier. Ka! An extremely low muffled sound rang out. The ball of lightning actually sank into the barrier. Immediately, the barrier gave birth to a strong vibration. Although the sound wasn't loud, it seemed as if the entire space was shaking. Right now! Xiaohua's heart stirred. He rubbed his hands together and several fiery red brilliance rushed into the air. Caw! The sound of a bird's cry resounded through the entire space. The Golden Crow Execution Immortal Demon Formation was activated by Xiaohua. Not only was an extremely hot heat generated in the air, a powerful suction force was also generated from the demon formation. Wherever the suction force passed, the heaven and earth origin chi in the entire space was swept away. Immediately, a golden crow that was several zhang in size condensed in the heat wave and origin chi. Although this golden crow wasn't too complete, its desolate and unruly aura immediately filled the entire space. Xiaohua pointed his finger. The golden crow, like a setting sun in the vast sky, fell towards the place where the ball of lightning previously set off ripples. Another bird's cry rang out. On top of the barrier, the light of lightning hadn't faded away, and the light of fire was born again. A several chi-deep dent appeared. Hiss! Admittedly, Fujiwen wasn't at the side, but when he saw Xiaohua cast the spell, he immediately came to the side to watch. He saw that Xiaohua's magic power was practically sky-high, but this barrier was even more tenacious. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. In his heart, he became a bit more eager for the Tsang Lang Zi's orthodoxy and formation. Good, Xiaohua's complexion was the same as usual. He wasn't dispirited because his 2 methods didn't tear apart the barrier. He still followed the prescribed order. With a wave of his hand, the soaring dragon scissors transformed into a golden flood dragon. The dragon's tail flung out. Ka! It accurately chopped at the place where the dent was. Afterwards, without waiting for the soaring dragon scissors to be retracted, the voice of the Confucian cultivator Xiaohua was heard in the air again. Watch me! Woo-woo! In the void, hundreds of awe-inspiring chi pillars appeared with a loud bang. A dazzling imperial weapon flew out from the sword light. It was the imperial weapon that was originally called the Imperial Star Stab, but now it was called the Dismal Soul-Injuring Imperial Weapon. The star passing leads the spirit, the star falling injures the soul, the dim injures the soul, the spirit injures the soul. With the noble spirit hit the enchantment, the whole enchantment shook again. The impact pulled the enchantment to the extreme, but in Xiaohua's eyes, the enchantment's tough brilliance was still thin and did not collapse under the 3 methods of the Confucian soul. Kunlun Mirror! Xiaohua shouted. Green-robed Xiaohua was already prepared. He shouted loudly, "As you wish." But then, a light pillar once again descended from the sky and hit the connection of the thin threads with a loud bang. The strange thing was, before the crack on the barrier appeared, the Kunlun Mirror's light pillar had already penetrated through. Good. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua shouted. Thousands of soul threads rushed into Xiaohua's forehead and followed the Kunlun Mirror's light pillar through the collapsing barrier and instantly wrapped around the underworld fruit. Sizzle! A strong corrosive sound came from the water of the yellow spring. Unfortunately, Xiaohua's soul threads had already been tempered by the sea of blood in the netherworld's eye of Million Meng Mountains. This was the water of the yellow spring, and it was far inferior to the netherworld sea. The soul threads wrapped around the underworld fruit, and in the blink of an eye, they retreated back into the mysterious dark cloud. Just when the underworld fruit touched Xiaohua's mysterious dark cloud, the heavenly runes and earth deed of the entire dark cloud emitted a strong brilliance. When the brilliance landed on the underworld fruit, the patterns on the entire fruit and leaves suddenly changed, producing an obscure rumbling sound. In just a few breaths of time, the underworld fruit penetrated through the heavenly runes and earth deed of the underworld fruit and rushed into the mysterious dark cloud. What was even stranger was, just when the underworld fruit rushed into the soul, a thumb-sized root fell off from the underworld fruit. How could Xiao Hua not know that this was the root of the underworld fruit? He immediately sent it into the dark side of the dimension. However, before he could take a look, he heard a shrill sound that sounded like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves. The entire mysterious dark cloud was rolling violently. "It's done, I'll go back first." Soul cultivator Xiao Hua's expression changed greatly. The green light on Xiao Hua's forehead disappeared, and he returned to the mysterious dark cloud. As soon as the underworld fruit entered the mysterious dark cloud, it immediately transformed into an infinitely tall tree that soared into the sky. Moreover, through the layers of spirit heavens, the leaves and the fruit produced a heavenly sound that sounded like the green seal script. The heavenly runes and earth deed of the underworld fruit emitted a strange fragrance that penetrated through all the spirit heavens. Amidst the heavenly sound, streams of netherworld water flowed out from the underworld fruit. Runes that were even more ancient and simpler than the green seal script rushed out from the netherworld water and disappeared into the mysterious dark cloud. Under the scouring of these runes, Xiao Hua's soul gradually underwent new changes. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua entered the mysterious dark cloud. Seeing so many changes, he knew that there was no big problem. Only then did he feel relieved. Ayo! With a dragon roar, the little white dragon swam its huge body and appeared beside Xiao Hua. It greedily sniffed the rare fragrance in the world. Xiao Hua received the soul cultivator's perception and knew that the underworld fruit was fine. He was overjoyed and said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, it's done. Thank you for your help." Good. Congratulations, fellow Taoists. Whether it was the scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua or the soul cultivator Xiao Hua, they all praised. At this time, looking at the barrier again, the crack that rushed out from the Kunlun mirror had already been repaired. The depression caused by the joint attack of the primordial spirits was also repaired by the other parts of the barrier in just a moment. All of this was like a white horse galloping through a crack. It was exactly as Xiao Hua had thought. Of course, it was only at this moment. Not to mention a white horse, even a white tiger would be pulled down by Xiao Hua. The underworld fruit was gone. So what if the barrier was repaired? Congratulations, congratulations. Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands. The scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua and the green-robed Xiao Hua both put away the primordial and magic arrays, took the magic tools and imperial tools, and returned to the middle and lower dantian respectively. Seeing Xiao Hua talking to himself for a long time, and seeing the sword-shaped Xiao Hua turn into true energy and enter Xiao Hua's head, Fu Jiwen flew into the air and bowed. "Congratulations, master." Congratulations too. Xiao Hua laughed. "You don't need this thing. You'd better look at what's in the medicinal field." Disciple knows. With master support, disciple doesn't need to worry about medicinal pills and cultivation methods. Fu Jiwen replied, "The higher master's cultivation, the happier disciple is." Right, did master use the imperial tool just now? Yes, that imperial tool was obtained by master at the Jade Pavilion conference. Once used, it must kill. Xiao Hua nodded. If it's not a critical moment, master won't use it. Master really has a lot of secrets. Fu Jiwen understood as soon as he heard this, and said with a smile. "Let's go. Don't say so many useless things. Take away the entire medicinal field, that's the real deal." Xiao Hua waved his big sleeves and flew towards Xiaogua and Little Silver. "Take it all away." Fu Jiwen was shocked. "Won't master leave some here? If others come in later, it won't be a wasted trip. We can't give them the chance to disturb the peace of Senior Zonglangzi's cave abode." Xiao Hua said in all seriousness and awe-inspiring righteousness, "Only by cleaning up this place will we not attract the covetous eyes of others." "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen curled his lip and hurriedly flew after him. The two of them took Xiaogua and Little Silver, and it took them several days to put all the spirit herbs into the space. Then the two of them looked at the clean medicinal field, clapped their hands, and flew back to the cave abode with smiles on their faces. Chapter 3761. Hee hee. Xiaohua stepped out of the alchemy room, looked at the empty cave, and said to Fu Jiwen with a smile, "Senior Longlongzi is really interesting." He placed all the treasures in the maze and left nothing in his cave, making people feel disappointed as soon as they entered. Is this also a kind of test? Who knows? Maybe he was afraid that too many cultivators would come in and doubt each other. Fu Jiwen blinked and said, "Master, since there is nothing in the cave, we should go out, right? If Senior Dao ran and the others are empty-handed, they are either still wandering in the maze or waiting outside the maze." "Don't worry." Xiaohua's gaze fell on the jade rui on the cloud bed and the jade shelves around it, and said with a smile, "We won't be coming to Senior Longlongzi's cave in the future, and other people probably won't be able to enter. It's a waste to leave these furnishings here. Why don't we take them all away and show them off in the cave when I open the cave?" "No way, master." Fu Jiwen completely understood Xiaohua's stinginess. "Go, take the jade shelves over there and the things in the cave that can be taken away." Xiaohua ordered without saying anything, and he directly turned around and went into the alchemy room, presumably to see if there was anything else that could be taken away. Fu Jiwen was helpless. He hurriedly entered another immortal's cave and put away the jade table, and so on. When he came out again, he saw that all the jade shelves and jade chairs had disappeared from Xiaohua's side. Xiaohua was walking to the side of the cloud bed. He raised his hand to take the jade table and jade scepter on it. Something is wrong. Just when Xiaohua was about to pick up the jade rui, a realization came from his mind. There is nothing in the entire cave. Why would there be a jade rui on the jade table for no reason? Could it be that there is something strange about this jade rui? No, thinking about it now, this jade rui was quite strange. With Xiaohua's stingy temperament, once he saw that there was nothing in the cave, he immediately lost interest in the jade rui. Even Huang Shou and the other two didn't seem to see it. Moreover, this jade rui was placed so casually. Could it be that Longlongzi left it behind before he left? This jade rui? I'm afraid it's not that simple. Xiaohua withdrew his magic power and carefully examined the jade table, jade rui, and the cloud bed. Unfortunately, when Fu Jiwen came over, Xiaohua found nothing. Fu Jiwen was very obedient and knew that this was not the time for him to speak, so he stood at the side in silence. "Strange," Xiaohua said again, and floated onto the cloud bed. Sitting on it, he looked around again, but didn't find anything. Xiaohua looked around the cave again, and when he saw that the jade rui was pointing at a distance, his heart was moved. He concentrated for a moment, and then released his divine sense again. Unfortunately, his divine sense still couldn't leave his body, so Xiaohua had no choice but to release his soul. When his soul swept over the stone wall where the jade rui was pointing, Xiaohua's body shook, and he hurriedly shouted, "Fu Jiwen, quickly go to the entrance of the cave and protect your master. Remember, don't look at your master." "Yes, master." Fu Jiwen was shocked, and immediately floated to the entrance of the cave. With his back facing Xiaohua, he looked outside the cave with a serious expression. Xiaohua took a deep breath, released his soul, and slowly scanned the stone wall in the distance. He saw that the jade rui was pointing at a place that was invisible to the naked eye, but his soul could see that there were 13 ants. Yes, they were ants. One of the world's most lowly little things, and now they were arranged in a strange formation. Each of them looked different, and they were crawling on the stone wall. However, these ants were different from the ones Xiaohua usually saw. These ants seemed to have small protrusions on their backs, like wings. It was clear that Longlongzi left behind the jade rui and sealed his divine sense and Buddhist sense, for no other reason than to not let others easily see these 13 ants that seemed to be able to fly. When Xiaohua's soul came in contact with these ants, a grand aura immediately entered his mind. These ants, what are they? Why does Senior Longlongzi treasure them so much? Xiaohua sat down cross-legged and released his soul again. Starting from the first ant, he saw the small ant's antennae and black shell gradually become clear, and that kind of vast aura became more and more intense. Boom! With a loud sound, the ant crawled up, and the whole ant became huge. A primordial chaos appeared from the ant's body, and immediately submerged Xiao Hua's soul. A very strange cultivator came out from the ant, and turned into a 10,000 zhang tall Dharma body. A voice like the sound of heaven came out from the cultivator's mouth. The path of heaven began in the primordial chaos. Along with this voice, Xiao Hua's figure became illusory again, and the galaxy in his eyes reappeared. The strange star power penetrated the 10,000 layers of restrictions and fell on Xiao Hua's body. Obscure fluctuations came out from Xiao Hua's body, and fell into the stone wall and the maze. The entire maze of Misty Mountain gave birth to strange fluctuations with Xiao Hua's comprehension. Fu Jiwen, who was guarding the entrance of the cave, was the first to bear the brunt. The heavenly book in his body flew out as soon as it came into contact with the fluctuations. The comprehension in the stone wall before was born from his heart. Fu Jiwen knew this was a chance, so he didn't dare to be negligent. He sat down cross-legged, and hundreds of inscriptions formed a formation talisman. Inside the maze, the confused Zhang Daoran, who was running around in confusion, suddenly came into contact with the fluctuations, and his body trembled rapidly. "Guard!" He just said this, and immediately sat down cross-legged, which made his disciples shocked. Then, without waiting for them to take out their magic weapons, the other late nascent soul stage cultivator, Reverend Han, also showed a happy face, and hurriedly said, "You don't need to guard, quickly cultivate. There's a big change in the maze, and there's a comprehension of the way of heaven." Then, Reverend Han also closed his eyes to comprehend the fluctuations, and all the disciples also sat around the two, cultivating without saying anything. Zhang Daoran, Sun Kong Shengren, Zhai Xingzi, and the others were the same. Only Gusu Qiudi and Gong Shu Isin sensed something different and hurriedly accompanied Zhai Xingzi to comprehend. As for what they would gain, only Tsang Longzi would know. As for Duanmu Liangxing, under the fluctuations, the maze was filled with an irresistible power of the way of heaven. Although he was angry, he didn't dare to act rashly. He could only close his eyes, wait for his heart to calm down, and carefully comprehend. The 13 ants were the 13 realms, and also the 13 supernatural powers. They involved formations, pill refinement, weapon refinement, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, body cultivation, comprehension, and the way of heaven. The supernatural powers inside were very heterogeneous, and even Xiao Hua, who had 10 primordial spirits, was amazed. In the beginning, Xiao Hua examined them one by one, but in the end, Xiao Hua simply divided his soul consciousness into 10 parts. Aside from Bodhi, who was in seclusion, the other primordial spirits followed Xiao Hua's mind to comprehend. In the end, Xiao Hua understood that most of the 13 ants were created by Tsang Longzi, a tribulation-passing cultivator, while a small portion was accumulated by Tsang Longzi. Tsang Longzi himself didn't cultivate, and these? Xiao Hua accepted them one by one. Enlightenment ants. After an unknown amount of time, Xiao Hua slowly opened his eyes, looked at the ants that had disappeared, and said in a low voice, "This? I'm afraid Senior Tsang Longzi's true legacy? What I obtained in the alchemy room, and what Fu Jiwen obtained from the other side of the cave, compared to this, it's insignificant. Who would have thought that the Tao legacy of a tribulation-passing cultivator would be carried on a small ant? A world in a flower, a spring and autumn in a leaf. Senior Tsang Longzi, I didn't expect you to be so proficient in Buddhism as well." With that thought, Xiao Hua's body suddenly trembled, and his eyes flashed with shock. Senior Tsang Longzi left behind such a legacy as a tribulation-passing cultivator, but the spiritual sense and other secret techniques within it don't seem to be as powerful as the secret techniques Do Shanjun gave me. What cultivation base does Do Shanjun have? Could he be a grand ascension stage cultivator? Xiao Hua's countless thoughts turned into questions in the end. These questions could only be buried deep in his heart, and he couldn't reveal them to anyone. Do Shanjun's identity could only be revealed by Do Shanjun himself, and if Xiao Hua revealed even the slightest hint of doubt, Do Shanjun wouldn't hesitate to kill him. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua floated down from the bed of clouds. The jade table and the jade scepter were taken into his space. However, when Xiaohua was about to take the bed of clouds away with a flick of his sleeve, Xiaohua was shocked. The bed of clouds seemed to be connected to the stone wall, not moving in the slightest. Forget it. Xiaohua smiled. I've gained a lot today, so I'll leave the cloud bed here. In the instant that Xiaohua carved the cloud bed, the fluctuations of the heavenly Tao within the misty mountain bewildering formation instantly disappeared, and a deafening sound rang out. All of the cultivators who were trapped in the bewildering formation saw a flash of light in front of them, and they could vaguely see that it was a rather large cave abode. Leaving aside the fact that everyone opened their eyes from their meditation, they were ecstatic to find that they were facing Tsang Lang Zi's real immortal's cave. Xiaohua walked down from the cloud bed and frowned. He sensed the sounds and changes in the maze inside the immortal's cave and then walked behind Fujiwen. The talismans around Fujiwen's body were still fluttering, but looking at them, they were much more advanced than before. Not bad. Xiaohua smiled to himself, then pinched his fingers to calculate. He raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "Damn it, it took me 3 years to comprehend the bewildering formation. These 3 years have been very fulfilling." Master? Fujiwen put away the inscriptions and jumped up. "Congratulations, Master." "Hee, congratulations to you too. Your heavenly book seems to have been completely condensed?" Xiaohua asked with a smile as he floated Fujiwen up. "Master, with your help, it has been condensed to 90%. Fujiwen respectfully said, "As long as this disciple accumulates a little, I estimate that this disciple will be able to enter the Great Confucian realm within 3 years." "Good." Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, "I'm very pleased to have such a disciple." Fujiwen did some calculations and said with a smile, "Master, we've been here for more than 3 years, let's go out early." Xiaohua nodded and led Fujiwen towards the entrance of the cave. Chapter 3762. 100,000 miles away from the Misty Mountain Maze, there was a place with dangerous mountains and rivers. The mountains were tens of thousands of feet high, and the rivers were majestic. There were layers upon layers of mountains, and the rivers were raging. The most eye-catching thing was the 5 strange hills. The hills looked like 5 monstrous beasts. They were either lying down, standing, curled up, or flying. In the middle of the hills, there was a head that could be faintly seen. Although the faces of the heads could not be seen clearly, there was a strange aura coming from the hills. This aura covered 1,000 miles, and within this 1,000 miles, there was no sign of life. Between the hills was a huge river. This surging river brought with it yellow sand as it poured down from the distant mountains. After passing through the hills, the yellow river had a dark red color. Above the hills, gusts of desolate wind swirled in the air. The red clouds that filled the sky seemed to be falling from the sky, pressing down extremely low. A kind of pressure that suffocated the earth came from the clouds. Woo-woo, hoo-hoo, other than the sound of the river, there was only the whimper of the cold wind. There was no other sound in the sky. Swoosh swoosh. At some unknown time, snowflakes larger than goose feathers began to fall from the red clouds. They seemed to be silent, but every time they swept across the chilly wind, there would be an indescribable fluctuation that gradually filled the world. Seeing that the mountains and rivers were about to be covered by the snow, a demonic cloud about 10 feet in size flew over. However, this demonic cloud only flashed through the snow and didn't stop at all. After flying for 1,000 miles over the hills, the demonic cloud suddenly turned around. When a powerful demonic sense swept across the hills and river, it stopped again. The demonic cloud dispersed, revealing a well-built demonic beast. This demonic beast was about 10 feet in size. A pair of withered yellow eyes revealed surprise, and the antlers on top of his head were very eye-catching. Wasn't this the Stag King? A halo appeared in the Stag King's eyes. It expanded like ripples, and when it landed in the nearby space, the goose feather-sized snowflakes stopped in midair. In the blink of an eye, the space within 1,000 feet was covered by this halo. Boom. Unfortunately, it was only a few breaths. The aura between the hills couldn't be suppressed and rushed into the halo. All the stagnation collapsed with a loud bang. The Stag King's body trembled a few times. A five-colored brilliance appeared from his body, and a huge deer body was revealed. Ah, it's really here. Not bad, it's here. Although the Stag King's body was revealed, he was unusually ecstatic. He looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. After half a cup of tea's time, the Stag King stopped. He looked around and flew to a mountain ridge in the distance. With a wave of his hand, a strange feather appeared in his hand. Puff! A demonic aura fell on the feather, and the feather glowed with starlight. A strange bird the size of a fist was born from the starlight. The Stag King opened his mouth and chanted a few indescribable demonic words. The strange bird nodded and spread its wings to 10 feet in size. It then rushed into the sky and disappeared in an instant. This king will wait here. The Stag King sat down casually and looked at the hills in the distance with satisfaction. He smiled and said, "Indeed, hard work pays off. This king has searched for 1,000 years and left footprints all over the 1,000 demonic sacred realm. I really didn't expect this place to be in the hidden immortal continent. If this king didn't read all the books of the human race, how would I know?" However, even in the hidden immortal continent, there are no less than 100 places with such strange phenomena. Old Monster Ji-Feng and the others have come in vain. This king has already obtained the first merit. The Stag King waited for dozens of days. On this day, the dark clouds looked like normal, but suddenly, a burst of fire flew over from the distance. The fire landed on the clouds and forced the dark clouds to roll, as if the clouds were splitting open to welcome it. At the same time, a deep sound like the groan of heaven and earth came from the distance. Seeing the strange situation in the sky, how could the Stag King not know that a demonic beast was coming? He stood up with a bitter smile and said to himself, "Why is this guy so arrogant wherever he goes? Doesn't he know that this is the hidden immortal continent? If some literary sage or literary star finds out, won't we all be in trouble? Oh, of course, this king will be in trouble, but this guy can't be in trouble." As the scarlet flame vermilion bird, the most promising vermilion bird to become a great sage, he cultivated to the moon-picking realm in just over 1,000 years. His strength is similar to a human's 6th-level origin energy. If he is bullied by a human, damn it, won't the vermilion bird clan turn the hidden immortal continent upside down? The Stag King flaunted himself as a king, so he naturally didn't dare to be negligent in front of such a proud genius. He was already standing in the air. Seeing the fire approaching, he raised his hands and bowed, "Fellow immortal Zhu, you've worked hard." A very unruly voice came from the distant fire. Once the voice came, all the fire and deep groans disappeared. It was as if everything in the world was gathered in a ball of dazzling fire. That flame flashed in the sky and disappeared. When it appeared, it was already in front of the Stag King's eyes. After the flame subsided, a several zhang tall demonic beast covered in scarlet flames walked out of the fire. "Just call me Zhu Mei. What's with the greeting? It's as if you're a Confucian human." "Hee hee, you're right. I've been walking around the hidden immortal continent for a long time. It's inevitable that I'll be tainted by the stinky human customs." The Stag King straightened up and laughed. "This so-called fellow immortal is just a flattery between the human race. It's really funny." Zhu Mei nodded slightly. That obvious demonic body was still there, as if it disdained to transform into a human. He looked left and right, then his fiery eyes fell on the 5 hills. He asked faintly, "This is the Cold Spirit Valley you mentioned?" "Yes, it's here. It's exactly the same as the memories passed down in my clan." The Stag King nodded and answered. Zhu Mei's eyes flashed. No emotions could be seen in his eyelids. He only said coldly, "That's strange. How come I didn't know that the demon race had such a Cold Spirit Valley? And this Cold Spirit Valley is actually in the hidden immortal continent?" "Hee hee." The Stag King laughed and said, "Zhu Mei, you're from the Vermilion Bird clan. You're a higher clan in the demon race. How can my Stag clan compare to you? I'm afraid the Vermilion Bird clan disdained to pass down this Cold Spirit Valley, right?" "That seems to be the case." Zhu Mei nodded, his face full of pride, and said, It's just that I owed you a little 100 years ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't waste my time here. The Stag King didn't get angry. He smiled and said, "Don't look down on it. As far as I know, this is where my demon race used to cultivate the sun-devouring demon physique. Even if it's abandoned now, and no longer beneficial to my cultivation, perhaps the ancient rewards are still inside. If I can get my hands on some ancient pure bloodline, it'll be greatly beneficial to my cultivation." "I hope it's as you say." Zhu Mei stretched lazily and opened her mouth. A pillar of flame soared into the sky, dispersing the clouds in the surrounding 1,000 feet. "I can't believe that there's a bloodline purer than my Vermilion Bird clan here. This is an ancient bloodline," the Stag King muttered in a low voice. But seeing that Zhu Mei didn't seem to care, he didn't say anything. "When will that rat come?" Zhu Mei suddenly asked. "I don't want to wait any longer." "He should be here soon." The Stag King looked in another direction and smiled apologetically. "Although old demon Jifeng is skilled in wind travel, he's still a far cry from you. Looks like we'll have to wait a few more days." A light conjuring realm rat dares to call himself an old demon. What a joke. Zhu Mei really didn't care about old demon Jifeng. "I really can't imagine why you're looking for him." Hee. Although his cultivation is low, he's still walked step by step from the hair-shedding realm to where he is now. With his age, it's reasonable for him to call himself an old demon. The Stag King explained, "I invited him here because he knows wind travel. As far as I know, there's a requirement to enter the Cold Spirit Valley. My dear clan is skilled in plants and vegetation, but not wind travel. Otherwise, we wouldn't have kept this a secret." Zhu Mei didn't comment. She looked coldly at the hills in the distance. Suddenly, a very cold primary will swept over from afar, like a person's gaze unscrupulously prying into another's privacy. "Who?" Zhu Mei shouted angrily. The feather on her forehead suddenly exploded, and a similarly strong primary will rushed out. Puff, puff, puff. A series of explosive sounds rang out. It was as though a falling tide had met a rising tide. The sky was filled with shockwaves. These shockwaves were either high or low. The high shockwaves shot straight up into the sky. Under the impact of these powerful shockwaves, the red clouds that were gradually calming down once again turned into many whirlpools. Within the whirlpools, hurricanes were stirred up. It was a phenomenon of wind and clouds surging. Swoosh! Zhu Mei spread her wings, and between her scarlet feathers, orange flames shot up into the sky. It was as if Zhu Mei had suffered a small loss and was preparing to use her divine ability. Ayo! At the same time, a loud dragon roar sounded from where the primary will came from. The dragon roar seemed to contain anger. Who dares to challenge Little King? An obscure and loud voice came from afar. A ray of blue light flew over, and a dragon that was dozens of feet long streaked across the sky. The dragon's aura was like an arrow, and the dragon's tail was like a scissor. It pounced toward Zhu Mei and King Stag. "Of course it's me." Zhu Mei sneered. She spread her wings, turned into a ball of flame, and rushed out. "Misunderstanding, misunderstanding." King Stag hurriedly shouted. At the same time, old monster Jifeng's figure also appeared behind the aqua-blue dragon. He shouted in unison, "It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding?" "Those who dare to attack Little King, how can it be a misunderstanding?" The blue dragon opened its mouth, and the heaven-earth yuan qi within 100 feet became chaotic. It fell towards the dragon that was dozens of feet long, and a spike-like whirlpool instantly appeared in front of the blue dragon's head. Chapter 3763. Little Prince, please wait. At this moment, a majestic voice sounded in the sky. Two figures flew over from behind old demon Jifeng. When they got closer, Stag King could see clearly that one was Ao Shuai, the inspector of the East Sea, and the other was dressed like a dragon general. He was taller than Ao Shuai, but Stag King didn't recognize his face. That voice came from this dragon general. The blue dragon seemed to be a little afraid of this dragon general. When it heard the voice, it coldly snorted and the light around its body faded away, turning into a humanoid figure. It stood there and looked provocatively at Zhu Mei, who hadn't transformed yet. Hee, Stag King Zhu Mei. Ao Shui said as he flew. I'm late. Sorry. Stag King didn't dare to let Zhu Mei speak. He quickly bowed and said, I'm already very happy that the inspector came in time and brought helpers. I'm a king? Which Stag King are you? What right do you have to call yourself a king? Before Ao Shui could say anything, the human figure of the blue dragon asked coldly. Stag King had heard the dragon general beside Ao Shui call him Little Prince. He immediately smiled and said, Little Prince, of course I don't dare to call myself king in front of the dragon race. But in my stag race, I'm considered a lord with over 100,000 miles of territory. Other demons call me king, so I can't disagree. That Little Prince wanted to say something, but the dragon general interrupted him. He stepped forward and cupped his hands. Mu Lu King, I'm Ao Zhan, the dragon guard of the East Sea Dragon Palace. This is my fourth prince's wife's brother, Ao Qian. This time, I accompanied the Little Prince out to train. I heard that Ao Shui wanted to explore the Cold Spirit Valley, so I brought the Little Prince here. I hope you can forgive me for not informing you beforehand. I thought it was some little prince. So it's a relative of the East Sea Dragon Palace. How pitiful. Zhu Mei laughed when she heard that. How dare you? Ao Qian was furious. The water around him flashed as if he was about to attack again. Oh, I wonder, where did you come from? How dare you mock my East Sea Dragon Palace? Ao Zhan's face turned cold as he looked at Zhu Mei indifferently. Even if he's a relative of the East Sea Dragon Palace, ordinary demons can't look up to him. Oh, this is Zhu Mei of the Vermilion Bird Tribe's Scarlet Flame Branch. Stag King hurriedly smiled. He's a genius of our Thousand Beast Sacred Realm. He's only cultivated for 1,000 years, but he's already reached the moon-plucking realm. He's the demon with the highest chance of becoming a great sage in the Vermilion Bird clan. It's just advancing to the 5th level of origin energy in 1,000 years. What's the big deal? Such demons are everywhere in my dragon clan. Ao Qian snorted coldly, seemingly very unwilling to admit defeat. Zhu Mei smiled and flapped her fiery wings. The dancing flames were just like the provocation in her eyes. Other dragons are other dragons, not you. If you're not convinced, you can come and compare. Why wouldn't I dare? Ao Qian was eager to try, and the water blue color around him gradually thickened. So it's Zhu Mei. Flying Feather Ni Kong Great Sage came to the East Sea Dragon Palace many years ago. My Dragon King once hosted a banquet to welcome her. When I was waiting outside the main hall, I heard the Great Sage praising you. Ao Zhan smiled. Oh. Zhu Mei's withered yellow eyes turned quickly, and there was shock in her eyes. The Flying Feather Ni Kong Great Sage was no ordinary demon. She was one of the 6 great sages of the Thousand Beast Sacred Realm, and she was ranked 3rd among the 6 great sages. She was 2 ranks higher than the Scarlet Flame Vermilion Bird of the Vermilion Bird clan. How could she not be surprised? Flying Feather Great Sage. Zhu Mei hurriedly lowered her voice and said respectfully, Why did you mention me? Ao Zhan didn't hide anything and said word by word. The saint only evaluated these 7 words and said that if you can achieve the first 2 words, you will be able to devour the sun within 2,000 years. If you can achieve the 4th word, you will be able to conquer the heavens within 5,000 years. If you can achieve the 7th word, you will be able to devour the sky and become a saint within 10,000 years. Hiss. When Ao Zhan said this, all the demons were shocked. The cultivation of demons was not as good as that of humans. Not only were their lifespans longer than humans, but they also had a harder time cultivating. For humans, whether it was Taoism, Confucianism, or Buddhism, it would take them 50 to 60,000 years to cultivate from level 1 to level 9. However, for demons, it would take them more than 100,000 years to cultivate from hair shedding, wisdom opening, light gathering, star picking, moon swallowing, sky swallowing, and finally sky swallowing to become a great sage. In particular, the beginning of human cultivation was the most difficult. Towards the end, although it became more and more difficult, there would always be a trace of opportunity that prevented people from feeling despair. As for Yao cultivation, the beginning was very simple. This was especially true for Zhu Mei, who had an ancient bloodline. She could reach the enlightening and light-conjuring realms right after she started cultivating. However, once she reached the moon-plucking realm, the sun-devouring realm and the sky-conjuring realm were like two heavenly moats. Without 10,000 years of cultivation and accumulation, it was impossible to break through. Sky swallowing required even more opportunity to become a great sage. It was not something that could be achieved through cultivation. With Zhu Mei's enviable talent, it was possible for her to reach the moon-picking realm within 1,000 years. However, just as Ao Qian had said, there were many dragons with such talent. However, sun swallowing within 2,000 years and sky swallowing within 5,000 years was still under the condition of achieving mind closing. There was no need for opportunity at all. This was impossible in the eyes of other demons. As for the last 3 words, heaven's secret, it shocked all the demons so much that their eyeballs almost fell out. Other demons needed 100,000 years of accumulation to become a great sage, and this was still dependent on opportunity. Under the same conditions, Zhu Mei could actually become a great sage within 20,000 years. This was such an evaluation. Ao. General Ao. Stag King stuttered. Great Sage Feather became a great sage within 80,000 years, right? Ao Zhan smiled. At that time, my Dragon King also said the same thing. He did not believe it either, but the great sage just smiled and did not explain. This? Why didn't I know about it? Zhu Mei asked in a low voice in ecstasy. If not for the Dragon Clan, who would know about the matters of the Dragon Palace? Ao Zhan replied proudly. However, the Dragon King did not issue an edict regarding your matter. I believe there is no need to hide it. Thank you, General Ao. Zhu Mei bowed respectfully. In his heart, he understood that this was the Dragon Palace's goodwill. These words were enough to save him thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years of trouble. Ah, congratulations, fellow immortal Zhu. Old demon Ji Feng sighed and cupped his hands. When I heard this, I felt jealous and envious. I have cultivated bitterly for 2,000 years and am only in the light-conjuring realm. I have just touched the threshold of the planet star. As for moon-plucking and sun-swallowing, I do not even dare to think about it. Perhaps one day when I am still struggling in the planet star, fellow immortal Zhu will have already become a great sage. Hee, fellow immortal Ji Feng, you are overthinking. Everyone has their own destinies. I merely borrowed the power of my bloodline. I can't compare to fellow immortals' steady cultivation, taking one step at a time. Zhu Mei was in a good mood. She didn't hesitate to talk about fellow immortal and her. That's right. Ao Shui glanced at Ao Qian, who had a strange expression, and hurriedly blocked him. He said to old demon Ji Feng, look at your cultivation, fellow immortal Ji Feng. Last time, you were in the light-conjuring realm and only in the upper middle of the 4th stage of essence energy. After not seeing you for a few years, aren't you also on the verge of the planet star? When you come out of the cold spirit valley, even if you did not receive any rewards, you should be able to reach the middle of the 5th stage of essence energy if you assimilate the bloodline you obtained, right? What does this little bit of improvement count for? How can it be compared to all of you? Old Demon Jifeng's face showed a trace of excitement as he hurriedly waved his hand. Then, the demons chatted for a while, and the tense atmosphere gradually dissipated. Stag King looked at the demons, cleared his throat, and raised his hand. Everyone please look. The 5 hills in front of you are the entrance to the Cold Spirit Valley. After entering, it will be the place where my ancient demon race tempered their bodies. According to the inheritance I obtained, there is an ancient star-gathering demon formation inside. The star energy is extremely abundant, and there is no impurity of the world's origin energy or noble qi. Using it to temper one's body is 10 times stronger than outside. Moreover, this training is divided into several stages. Every stage will have a corresponding reward, whether it is an inheritance fragment or a pure bloodline, which can allow our cultivation to reach a higher level. How come this king does not know of such a mysterious place? Ao Qian asked coldly. Ahem. Ao Zhan coughed and smiled. Young king, whether it is the 1,000 demons sacred realm, the hidden immortal continent, or the Pure Land, there are many ancient demon race ruins. My dragon race. Perhaps it is a little different from the vermilion bird race or the deer race. These inheritances may be a little lacking, so it is normal that young king does not know. Looking at the unconvinced Ao Qian, the stag king smiled bitterly in his heart. The unruly Zhu Mei was already hard enough. Now, with Ao Qian, whose temper was on par with Zhu Mei's, he didn't know if this trip would go smoothly. However, since he was already here, he had to follow the plan. After all, these two demons, he could not afford to offend them. Ao Qian snorted and looked up at the sky. The red clouds there had started to snow again. I have already mentioned this place to old demon Ji Feng and Ao Shuai. Stag King said again. Us 3 demons and Zhu may have all searched for the ruins. However, the specific way to enter. Who? Just as Stag King was about to say the way to enter, Ao Qian suddenly roared. His body turned into a blue light and rushed out. In a few breaths, he flew hundreds of feet. Ao Qian's target was the surging river in the distance. Before his body landed, a cluster of blue crystal threads shot out from the demon chi and hit the river thousands of feet away. Boom! The river water split apart and emitted a loud roar. Gravel that was 1,000 feet in size flew up from the riverbank. 2 water beasts that were dozens of feet long and 10 feet long were blown away by the crystal thread. When the corpses of the water beasts landed on the shore, they were riddled with holes and specks of blood. How could they still have any aura? At the same time, thank you to Flowing Water E and other fellow Taoists for their support. Today, I wish all of you good luck and great success in the Year of the Goat.